which is imperative. A Tale of the Assassin Without a Name by Scott Marlowe. The gloomy byways of Alchester are like a second home to me, so I usually think nothing of finding myself alone in a pitch-dark alley. But when the darkness rolls in like a dense fog, blocking the light from alchemical street lamps ahead, and the raucous liveliness of the nighttime crowd I'd left behind, I worry. The inky blackness didn't stop there either. Becoming so absolute I no longer saw my hand in front of my face. When I drew my next breath with a gasp, it felt like someone had tightened a garrote around my neck. I needed no further prompting. I drew my long knives, the comforting sturdiness of their bone hilts overcoming a very unfamiliar sense of panic. Such reassurances lasted as long as it took me to realize I'd suddenly and inexplicably lost all mobility. My arms, with knives held ready, stiffened. My legs, spaced apart and prepared to spring forward or back, grew heavy. My feet froze in position. Not one to capitulate under any circumstances, I strained against my invisible bonds until I felt my heart might burst from my chest, all to no avail. Hell and damnation, I'd stepped in it this time. Despite my physical impairment, my mind was clear, so I shoved thoughts of defeat aside and quickly analyzed my predicament. Sorcery was at work here, perpetrated by unknown parties. Someone wanted me alive. Breathing while challenging was not impossible, but probably not for long. Vapors such as these were meant to obscure only one thing: murder. My murder, if I didn't find some way to free myself. After another series of futile attempts that earned me nothing more than a fine layer of perspiration on my skin despite the night's chill, I realized I might have better luck wishing for one last swallow of this evening's burgundy gettery. Delectable did not begin to describe the smoky overtures drifting from the full-bodied wine. Exquisite fell short of characterizing the spicy plum of its flavor. Paired with the finest cut of lamb I'd enjoyed in some time, it had been a fitting last meal. I wasn't sure what to expect next. Knives flying at me through the dense fog? A crossbow bolt directed toward my heart? Or, given present circumstances, perhaps a ball of sorceress fire blazing a path through the dark right before it burned me away to nothingness? Whatever was to come, I could not have predicted the flurry of black wings, copper-flecked eyes, or vicious pointed beak delivering an all-too-familiar screech as the bird I'd come to dread emerged from the inky dark. I would have cringed at the noise and reached out and throttled the fat crow if I could move. Ma! At each of our earlier encounters, the mysterious crow had tried to assail me with claws and beak. I doubted this time would be any different. My usual salvation, my lightning-quick reflexes, were useless under the influence of the crow's debilitating magic. I knew that was a ridiculous thought. Crows did not perform magic. But this one had harried me too many times to consider our meetings coincidental. As far as I was concerned, its appearance under such dire circumstances labeled it the responsible party, and I suspected the crow was no crow at all but a sorcery-wielding shapeshifter. Wings spread wide, the crow flew straight for my head. Right when I was sure it meant to take one or both of my eyes out, it pulled up. Wings smacked me in the face, but only as a precursor to the crow settling onto my shoulder. "Tilda," the rose said, blasting its odd noise directly into my ear. Then it had the nerve to chortle at my predicament. "If you mean to shat on me," I said, discovering my speech unhindered, "then do it already, you idiotic chicken. At least reveal yourself once and for all. I know you're more than a crow." The bird chortled again, deeper this time, and then took flight, flapping away into the thick darkness. With the crow gone, the alley returned to stillness. Strange that no passerby, drawn by the sight of the unnatural darkness, came down the alley in my wake. The street I'd come from was one of the heavier trafficked in the shambles. While I expected no help from the shady denizens of this hellhole of a district, I wouldn't put it past them to take advantage of my helplessness. But no one wandered into the alley, nor did the crow return to bother me. I remained alone in the quiet, gloomy darkness, wondering if I'd ever see another living being again, when I finally heard footsteps approaching. The misty dark seemed to part, or at least grow less dense, as the approaching figure became visible. The newcomer, a woman, by her slightness of build, wore a hooded cape and clothing so dark I might not have even noticed her if I hadn't heard the clop of her shoes. She walked directly toward me, each step bringing her into sharper focus. A small mouth with narrow lips pressed together stood out from the shadow of her hood. Darkened fingernails tipped her hands. She was lean and perhaps 6 inches shorter than my own 6 feet. Her weapons, a dagger and small sword, remained housed in their sheaths at her belt. With a handful of paces still separating us, she stopped and drew back her hood. Plum-colored hair framed her delicate features. High cheekbones, a dainty nose, and green eyes shadowed all around by a dark, sooty substance. I hesitated to label her skin as pale, for it was more like the tint of ash, and marked her as something either otherworldly or tainted by death magic. Only one thing was certain. Here was my shape-shifting crow, taken human form at last. Or so I thought until the fat crow streaked back into view, squawking once before landing on the woman's shoulder. "Matilda!" When the echo of the bird's cry fell silent, the woman spoke. Her voice was soft, her words whisper quiet. "I wish to hire you." "You have a funny way of asking," I said. "Who the hell are you?" The crow squawked. "My name is Matilda. You are already acquainted with my familiar. He has no name. When I need him, I simply call him you. Release me, witch, or you'll soon be calling him dead. First, you will agree to assist me." "First you'll release me," I said, countering. "The quicker you do so, the less likely I am to kill you. Do it now, and maybe I'll forget any of this happened." The woman pinched her lips. "Your terms are not agreeable." "My terms?" "Those weren't terms. This is not a negotiation." "You are right. This is not. You will help me, or it is you who will never leave this alley alive." The crow rang in with another chortle. Realizing I'd shown my cards too early, I hadn't expected a threat in kind from the woman, and that I couldn't follow through anyway given that I still couldn't move a muscle. I tried a different tactic. Fortunately, I had an assortment of skills, chief amongst them my charm. "I fear you and I have gotten off on the wrong foot, madam," I said, my tone congenial. "You said your name is Matilda. Mine is Edwarton. Edwarton Serenius. It wasn't really, but I've had a reason for many years now to never use my real one. I rather liked the sound of Edwarton, too. Admittedly, the surname needed some work, but fortunately, changing names as often as I did afforded me plenty of opportunities for refinement. It is a pleasure to meet you and your familiar. He's a fine, plump bird." I wanted to bow, to punctuate my feigned sincerity, but given my current predicament, I had to settle for a slight nod instead. It was the most movement I'd managed throughout this entire episode. I finished my overture with a smile that had melted more than its fair share of women's hearts. Matilda narrowed her gaze, then said, "Lie once, think me a dunce. Lie twice, roll the dice." "Is that supposed to mean something?" "It means do not test me. You are a liar." Perhaps this woman had no heart to melt. "How do you figure?" I asked. "You've no name, for one," she said. "None people know, leastwise. Also, you take no pleasure whatsoever in our encounter." She had me there. "You're right on both counts. You know who I am. What else do you know?" "I know enough." "Then you know I'm not one to trifle with. Release me. Agree to lend me your aid and I will. Release me. Explain why you need to hire me and I'll consider it." She sniffed, thinking it over. "Very well." Just like that, I could move again. With knives still in both hands, I briefly considered using one to kill her. But a deal was a deal, so I put my blades away. Besides, she'd piqued my curiosity. I'd listened to what she had to say, but that didn't mean I intended to accept her as a client, nor would I wait for her to take the next step in our dialogue. I had questions of my own. "You've had your crow spying on me for weeks now." I flexed my arms and legs. Thankfully, nothing seemed out of order. "Why?" "Not spying," she said, her expression gone pouty at my choice of words. "Watching over you. Keeping you out of trouble." Almost causing me to fall from a building is keeping me out of trouble? Your bird is a menace." Matilda shrugged. "You has a mind of his own sometimes. He must have found something humorous about your situation." "Nothing humorous about me falling to my death." A chill went through me at the thought, reminding me of the night's cold. I pulled my cloak tighter to ward it off. She shrugged again. "He helped you on the airship, didn't he? If he hadn't led the Jackery to your location, you and your lady friend would be dead right now." That's not exactly how I remembered things. It had been the Jackery's arrival that had nearly caused our deaths. I would have corrected her on that point if something else she'd said hadn't caught my attention. Matilda knew about Liz. It made sense that if the witch knew about me, she might also know about Elizabeth. But if Matilda meant to waylay and threaten Liz, I might have to reconsider our deal and my levity. Supposition aside, though, she hadn't given me a reason to outright kill her, yet. The crow had been annoying, and her ambush alarming, but she had a point about the Jackery. They'd been a welcome distraction, allowing Liz to find what we were looking for and, I'll admit, quite possibly saving my life. Thinking back, I realized now that one of the Jackery priests had given me a clue to this woman's identity. "You have a powerful ally in this one, assassin," Utet had said, laughing as he'd brandished twin Chris knives at our common enemy. "Be thankful she watches over you." The priest hadn't elaborated beyond that, though it was obvious now the person he'd referred to was Matilda. She'd done nothing yet to label herself an enemy, but neither had she done enough to warrant the title of friend or ally. But Utet's words still played in my mind, and I wondered enough to say, "Tell me about your relationship with the Jackery. One of them knew you." "They wanted to hunt you down and kill you for violating the sanctity of their home and killing members of their priesthood, but I made a deal with them. In exchange for allowing you to live, I granted them a boon of no small consequence." "So you're in league with them?" Matilda shook her head. "No, I made this bargain because I need you. That is all. I will honor my end of the bargain I struck with them. Then, once it is fulfilled, and I've no further indenture to them, I mean to destroy every last one of them." "Oh, really?" "Yes. Before that, though, I will see the organization you call the Warders ended, its members slain or driven from Alchester." I whistled. "Those are some grand ambitions you've got. Do you mean to do this yourself, or do you have an army holed up somewhere in the city ready to march at your command?" "I've no army. I've only you and you." "What? Oh, never mind." She meant the crow. "You expect the three of us to rid Alchester of both the Jackery and the Warders? No offense, but I think you've been spending too much time inhaling this mist of yours. I don't know why you've taken such an interest in me, and quite frankly, I don't care. I do thank you for keeping the Jackery off my back. The old gods know I've got enough people in the city trying to kill me right now, so I appreciate the breathing room. But I work freelance, which means I get to choose my clients. I wish you well with your endeavor, but you'll have to count me out." Matilda huffed with impatience. "I will pay above your usual rate for your help." "That's generous of you, but the answer is still no. Now, I intend to leave. I hope you'll dispense with the mummery and allow me to go unhindered." I waited, wondering if her reply would come verbally, physically, or magically. I was prepared for the first two. The third I wasn't so sure about, but she only stared at me. Her crow shifted from one foot to another on her shoulder, staying quiet for a change. "Very well," she said. "I will allow you to go. But I know you will change your mind and accept my offer. When you are ready to do so, return to this alley." "Right," I said, already moving past the woman and her familiar. When I was almost alongside her, she uttered a short phrase that stopped me in my tracks. "Leave this place. Find your taste misplaced." I looked at her with suspicion. "What did you just say?" "Nothing. Remember, return here when you are ready to accept my commission." I shook my head, exiting the alley as swiftly as possible without appearing to hurry. Clearly the woman was cracked. I'd best get away while the possibility of escape remained. The further I moved away from her, the less dense the mist grew until I soon walked beneath the cloudy night sky again. Sound returned too, both ahead and behind. Looking over my shoulder, it surprised me to see the alley clear to canvas row. Mist, the woman and the crow had all disappeared. Shaking my head some more, I quickened my pace, no longer concerned with appearances, as I set my mind on more productive activities. Such activities started and ended this night at the groggery, a hole-in-the-wall grog shop buried beneath a dilapidated tenement that would have been condemned a decade ago in any district other than the Shambles. The place was off the beaten path, which meant it was quiet. Best of all, strangers weren't welcome, so I was relatively safe from the various parties about the city who wished to do me harm. I didn't frequent the groggery enough to have a regular table, so I waded through the candle-lit murk of the place until I found a seat where I could keep my back to the wall and a vigilant eye on my fellow drinkers. Just because I was safe from people outside the grog shop didn't mean I was safe from the ones inside. A serving girl recognized me and went to fetch my usual order of Muscat Blanc, a domestic vintage pressed from the grapes of Calendor's western hill country. I knew this particular delicacy for its sweet floral aroma, which translated into a taste that started sweet on the tongue and finished with a lingering dryness. The wine was a rare find in this part of the city. I was certain the crates had been meant for a much finer establishment. Still, I wasn't one to pass up such an opportunity. As soon as I'd learned of it, I'd bought the proprietor's entire stock, paying him extra to keep it on reserve for me. The serving girl knew I tipped well, so my drink arrived in no time. I gave the wine a swirl, urging forth its bountiful fragrance of citrus, rose, and peach. Satisfied but wanting to savor every aspect of the tasting process, I held the glass to a nearby light, scrutinizing the liquid's translucent golden yellow. Such a spectacular sight prompted me to take the smallest sample, rolling the sip around my mouth as I waited for the delicate, fruity flavor to caress my palate. 2 swishes back and forth yielded an unexpected blandness that carried over into the middle tasting stage, the evolution phase, as wine elitists like to call it, so that as I entered the finishing stage, I didn't quite know what to expect. More of the same, it turned out. I looked quizzically at my glass, wondering why the wine had failed me. I ran through my pre-tasting checklist again, confirming that smell, color, and clarity were as expected at each stage. Another taste yielded the same disappointing, flavorless results. I called out to the serving girl who was nearby, seeing to other customers. She hurried over as soon as she was able. "Did you open a bottle of the Muscat Blanc or some other wine?" The girl was stick-thin and young, but a shambler through and through who was well used to the rough and tumble life of those who called this district home. She lifted her chin, defiant. "It's the Muscat. I opened it myself." As far as I could tell, she wasn't lying. Unlikely as it seemed, perhaps the bottle had simply gone bad. In that case, though, I expected a vinegary taste, not the complete absence of any flavor at all. "I think something's gone amiss with this bottle, then," I said. "Sip this for me, please, and see if you agree." Her face screwed into an expression of indignation. "You any idea what old Gregory will do to me if he sees me drinking on the job?" She followed her protest with a furtive glance over each shoulder. Then she took the wine glass from my outstretched hand and downed its contents in one pull. She shrugged. "Tastes fine to me. A bit fruity. But who am I to judge what drink a man such as yourself fancies?" I sat back in my chair, affronted. Not at the insult she'd levied, but at her comment about the wine. A Muscat Blanc is not fruity. Perhaps you mistake it for a Chardonnay Ruffino or a Vranin Pinot. True, the color and clarity are similar, and yes, there is a fruit component to any Muscat, but what you are tasting is a blend of... I stopped myself, realizing I was trying to discuss the intricate details of wine tasting with someone who waited tables in a grog shop. Oh, never mind. Not for the first time, I lamented the missteps that had forced me to avoid my usual high society purlieus for places such as these. In any case, the wine tasted all right to you? Odd. Still, please open another bottle. Better yet, bring an unopened one here and I'll do it myself. She shrugged her indifference to my request before walking off to see it done. Returning moments later, she deposited an unopened bottle of the Muscat Blanc and an opener onto my table. With the bottle uncorked and my glass refilled, I repeated my ritual, satisfied in all ways until I took a small sip. Again, the expected dance of multiple flavors ended before it began. I tasted nothing at all. Only then did the witch's words return to me. "Leave this place, find your taste misplaced." Damn hoodoo. The witch, sorceress, or whatever she was, had cursed me. Standing, I left the bottle and glass behind and exited the grog shop. Before long, I was back in the alley. Sans the unnatural darkness and mist this time. Matilda was already there, without her crow, leaning against the wall with arms crossed and a smirk I longed to wipe from her face. But not before I discovered what she'd done to me. "Are you ready to accept my proposal?" she asked, before I could launch into the tirade I'd prepared on the way over. "I'm ready to accept an explanation. What the hell did you do to me?" "Nothing that cannot be undone." "Then undo it." Though her eyes drifted to the hand I'd placed on the hilt of one of my knives, she still said, "No." I took a threatening step toward her. "I am losing patience with you, witch." Matilda pushed away from the wall and matched my step with a handful of her own, until she stood inches away. Her gaze met mine head-on. "As am I with you," she said. "You have no one to blame but yourself for your current predicament." I asked nicely. "That was nice?" You ambushed me and froze me in place. "As I said, I asked nicely. You do not wish to know what it means for me to ask any other way." I continued to meet her stare as I contemplated my options. As much as I wanted to end her life, I had no way of knowing if that would solve my problem or damn me to an eternity of neutered taste buds. My knife at her throat might supply sufficient motivation for her to undo her magic, or, more likely, only strengthen her resolve. Charm had gotten me nowhere, either. It seemed she had me over a barrel. "What exactly do you want?" I asked. "Your help. Once it is given, and your task is complete, I will lift the curse." "And why exactly do you want or need my help at all?" "You are an assassin, are you not?" "Yes, that's right." "Good, because I wish for you to assassinate someone." That was it then. Cut away all the mummery, and this was just another ordinary job. Except I had a feeling the mark was anything but ordinary. I waited for her to supply more details. "I want you to kill the primus of the Warders." The Warders were a secret organization, come to Alchester on a seemingly benign mission to stop the dark machinations of the Jackery. While there had never been any doubt the priests of the Jackery meant to harm the good citizens of Alchester, the intentions of the Warders remained elusive at best. I learned that members of the secret organization had a handful of fancy titles like Imperator and Compulsor, but Primus was a new one. Still, I had a pretty good idea what it meant. "Let me guess," I said. "The Primus is the Warders' leader." "Yes," Matilda said, "their supreme commander." The gall of the woman forced me to reconsider my opinion of her. Such a strategy suggested bravado, or stupidity, but also a sense of expediency. Why go after the underlings when you can target a much higher value mark, like the head of the entire organization? Despite my misgivings about this woman, I was at least beginning to admire her thought process. "So, who is this person?" I asked. I needed to know more than a name. The rest, place of employment, residence, daily work schedule, and the person's usual routes through the city, I could find out on my own later. But it all started with a name, so I waited for my prospective client to supply one. A handful of long seconds passed before she responded with a simple shake of her head. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked. "The Primus has a name, doesn't he? We can't all go around without one." "He has one." Matilda let out a breath. "But I don't know what it is." "Then tell me where I can find him or what he looks like, and I'll take it from there." Again, Matilda shook her head. "I know nothing about his location or his appearance." "All right. What do you know about him, then? Is he even a he, or is he a she?" "I know nothing about the Primus other than that he or she exists. Discovering his or her identity is part of the job." I scratched at my chin. So if you don't know a thing about this person, how do you know this person is real? Because the dark spirits told me so. Dark spirits? I would have laughed if Matilda's expression wasn't so serious. They told me many things about the warders. Chief amongst their insights was that the organization follows a leader they call primus. But the warders are secretive, and even the spirits have their limitations. They told me nothing more about this person other than the title. So little information up front didn't bode well for this job's success. You're asking a lot. Too much, maybe. Until a short time ago, I didn't know the identity of a single warder. Even then, I'd only acquainted myself with 2 of them, neither of whom had been high-ranking. Still, I had some resources to draw on. My associates in this matter, Elizabeth West and Atticus Drake, who had joined forces to uncover the reason for the warder's presence in Alchester, were working on an organizational chart. They attempted to put names or faces to the warder's command hierarchy. They'd been at it a couple of weeks, though I hadn't seen any significant progress the one time I'd stopped by to see how they were getting along. Matilda had yet to earn my trust, just the opposite, actually. So I kept most of that to myself and said only, "While it's true I've many avenues available for finding information, I'm not an inspector. Even the smallest tidbit about the warders has proven elusive, so unless you have some scrap of evidence or a clue to give me a starting point, I don't see how I can accept your commission." "I have this," Matilda said, jamming a rolled-up piece of parchment into my face and waving it about so I had no choice but to snatch it away before she riddled my face with paper cuts. "And this is what?" I unrolled the parchment, angling it to catch what little moonlight filtered through the clouds and into the alley's recesses. It looked like a manifest of some sort. "I believe it is a manifest of some sort," Matilda said. "My thoughts exactly," I replied automatically until it occurred to me that her words echoed my thoughts precisely. "Wait a minute. You're not by any chance. I've heard stories about witchy women reading minds and... What do you know about thurine dioxyplem, cephanol, and baroxium acid? They are listed on the manifest, along with some other less notable alchemicals." I skipped the heading, which named the shipping company, and went straight to the list, confirming the alchemicals she'd rattled off, as well as a short list of some others. They're accelerants. I knew this because Liz had told me so during our last job together. She'd named one for sure and another only partially, but I knew enough to fill in the missing information, including that the warders had brought the same alchemicals into the city illegally a few months back. I inspected the shipping company's information. Eagle Imports. The name meant nothing to me. I supposed it was one of the many airship trading companies frequenting Alchester's air docks. The destination address? Now that meant something. "Ridland's Den," I said. My gaze drifted to Matilda. "You know the place?" "Only by reputation." Ridland's had a nasty one, too. Part gaming hall, part grog shop, all cesspit. A good night at Ridland's meant no one had gotten their throat slit. Games of risk and daring, coupled with copious amounts of strong drink, brought out the worst in people. It didn't help the establishment's reputation that it was located deep in the shambles, nor that when it came to stakes, anything went. You might wager as little as a single dinar or as much as your life on a single dice roll. An upturned Reaper card at the ferryman's table meant 3 rounds in Ridland's fight ring. Oh, the games at Ridland's had rules, except when they didn't. I regularly frequented the place in my younger, more thrill-seeking days. Nowadays, though, I stayed clear of it. The owner, Ridland Tamarack, was a real arsehole. I didn't like him when I'd first met him, and I didn't like him now, so I figured I was doing him a favor by staying out of his establishment. The longer I stayed away, the longer he got to continue living. I gestured with the shipping manifest. "Where did you get this?" "I found it on a warder's body after I killed her." "How'd you know she was a warder?" "Because she told me so." "They haven't struck me as the cooperative type." She was not, but she had no choice after I'd bent her will to my own. I wanted no further details on that. Damn hoodoo. "What else did she tell you?" "Nothing." Her mind proved stronger than expected. She broke free from my spell. We fought. She died. I found the manifest on her person after. The last bit sounded plausible, so I had no reason to question her further. I drew Matilda's attention back to the parchment. This isn't the first time I've seen alchemicals like these mentioned alongside the warders. Previously, they had the goods delivered to a legitimate processing company. That venture didn't end well for anyone. Least of all, the alchemist hoodwinked into helping the warders. He died in a fiery public explosion, and the resulting scrutiny must have prompted the warders to seek more inconspicuous partners. Ridlin has an alchemical processing facility beneath the den. Not everyone knows about it, but it's there. Some of the finest ice fire and devil's tongue come out of his operation, or so I'm told. Using drugs in my line of work invites carelessness, which quickly leads to disaster and a quick death, so I've never had a use for them. Plenty in Alchester did, though. The clientele for such substances ran the gamut of the city's social hierarchy, from the lowest of the low all the way to the upper crust. "Then we must go there," Matilda said. I set aside her use of the word "we" for the moment. "To what end? Your fights with the warders, stirring up trouble in that den of cutthroats and drug peddlers won't help your cause. Neither would it help mine. The old gods knew I had enough enemies in the city. I didn't need any more. If the warders are doing business with Ridlin, they'll have someone there to oversee the operation or at least check in occasionally. Will they not?" I gave it some thought and had to agree. "Then we will go to Ridlin's den and wait for one of their representatives to arrive. We will then waylay this person, either as they are coming or leaving, and then we will compel them to tell us what we need to know." The plan was not without flaws, but it wasn't half bad. By the look in her eye, she was ready to get started. "Not so fast, little witch." "What if I say no?" Matilda scoffed. "I have already cursed you. You will never taste wine again until I lift the curse. I have taken away that which you hold most dear. What more do I need to do? How about explaining why you're so interested in the warders?" Most of the time, a job was a job. I didn't bother asking questions irrelevant to the objective or which might reveal the client's motives in too great of detail. People come to me with discretion in mind. An exchange of terms and execution of the contract, that's my business model. But Matilda had made this more than a business arrangement by meddling in other jobs of mine and now placing a curse on me. A very personal curse, which made our relationship a very personal one. She must suspect I might try to kill her when this was all over and done. If not for the curse, I'd do it right now and have her out of my life for good. But she had me, and she knew it. "My reasons are my own," she said. I crossed my arms. "Explain them to me." She looked ready to refuse my request once more. I think she was about to. But then, you sailed in and landed on her shoulder. The crow settled his wings, then opened and closed his beak, though he emitted no sound. She looked at him as if seeking counsel. You must have given her his approval, for she said, "The dark spirits showed me what fate the warders have for our city. Nothing specific about their plans, but a vision of what they will leave behind once their dark machinations come to fruition. Suffice to say, it is nothing good. This city is my home, just as it is yours. I would not see it destroyed." I didn't know how much stock to take in her dark spirits, but I couldn't argue the point that the warders had something bad in mind for all of us. Her explanation sufficed, at least for now. "All right," I said. "I accept your commission, but I have conditions. First, you have me for one night. If I don't find the primus, you pay me my usual fee, lift the curse, and we go our separate ways. But if I find this person, then you'll pay me triple, lift the curse, and I'll thank you for never crossing my path again. If those terms are not agreeable, lift the curse now, and we'll end this arrangement before it begins." Triple my fee was not out of the question. Given the circumstances, I might as well come out of this with something extra. Nor was the time constraint. I wasn't entering an open-ended agreement with anyone, let alone a witch. The one snag, and quite possibly my salvation, was that I doubted she could afford even half my fee, let alone the exorbitant amount I'd proposed. She proved such doubts wrong by tossing me a pouch jingling with coins. "Consider that a down payment," she said. "If you wish, I can get more before we start. Otherwise, I will pay the rest upon completion of the commission." The pouch held enough glittering gold crowns to cover my retainer and then some. That left one last point to discuss. "You keep saying 'we,' as if you're coming with me. I work alone. Best return to your crystal ball and cards of fate while you wait for word of the results." Her nostrils flared, and her small hands curled into fists at her sides. "I am going with you. This is not open to further discussion." Oh, but it was. I put up a good fight. In the end, though, she didn't so much wear down my resolve as simply refused to budge from her position. I was also growing tired of hearing her voice, or so I told myself. "Just make sure you don't get yourself killed. I want the curse removed." She humphed but said nothing else. "And if we come up empty?" I asked. "What happens if we don't even find their primus?" "Come morning, I will undo the curse and absolve you of all obligations, no matter the outcome." She spat in her hand, then held it out to me. "Shall we seal our bargain?" I took one look at her glistening palm and wrinkled my nose. That's not how I usually finalize a deal, especially with a witch. Who knows what bargains or pacts she'd squeeze out of me in the future with something like my saliva at hand to bolster her magic? "Your word is good enough." She shrugged and wiped her palm on her cape. "Suit yourself." Getting to Ridlin's den was easy enough. We were already in the shambles, so a quick jaunt found us standing on a corner a half-block away, with the establishment under our watchful gazes. Others shared the street with us, but no one knew what we were up to, so I expected no trouble. You had flown off to parts unknown on the way over, so at least he was not present to annoy me or draw unwanted attention. We could probably loiter at this spot indefinitely, but I didn't fancy hanging about in the cold all night with nothing to show for our trouble. We would have nothing too, unless we altered the plan. I'd not bothered to mention the obvious flaw earlier, but here it was. We would never spot our mark this way. Warders didn't wear uniforms or special insignia. On the surface, everything about them was ordinary. They wore ordinary clothes, had ordinary faces, and went about their nefarious business as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Matilda's plan, therefore, needed some tweaking. The witch, who was of a like mind once I explained things to her, made the first suggestion. "We should abduct Ridlin and make him tell us who he is working with." A bold idea, but not one without issues. "I'm sure Ridlin's inside, but he's likely always guarded. It'd be tough to get to him, even in a neutral place." "But right in the middle of his establishment?" I shook my head. "I think we need to go inside and look around. Maybe even get a tour of the lab. That manifest led you this far. Maybe some similar documentation can get us to the next step. Just remember, we're there to observe and gather information, nothing more. No abductions and absolutely no mummery." Matilda pressed her lips together and gave me the evil eye. Figuratively, I hoped. "We're just looking for information right now, got it?" She didn't like it, but she nodded her agreement. "First, we need to get inside Ridlin's den, which isn't as easy as you might think. It's a regulars-only sort of place, so no one gets in without a pass. If you'd given me some lead time, I could have had a couple stolen or forged for us, but since we're already here, I'll have to improvise. Fortunately for you, improvising is my specialty." I extended a hand. "I have a ruse in mind that works best if we pretend to have some familiarity with one another. We make an odd pair, with you the otter. But there's nothing to do for that now. Just hang on my arm, act drunk if you like, but leave all the talking to me. Once we're inside, keep up the routine. If we don't stand out, no one will take notice, so we should be able to move about with impunity. We mustn't give anyone a reason to suspect us, starting with the goons at the door. If they smell something funny, we'll have someone watching us until we leave. If they allow us to leave at all, that is." "So our objective is to get inside unnoticed?" Matilda asked. "The lower our profile, the better. Once inside, we can blend in, but we must get through the front door first." "Then follow me." Matilda walked away, ignoring my protests, so I had little choice but to follow her. I thought perhaps she had some secret back entrance in mind, but after winding her way through a small crowd of half-drunken fools loitering about in front of the den, she led us straight to the front door. A pair of bruisers, each 3 times bigger than Matilda and about twice my size, stood casually in front of it. Laughter and the occasional shout from the drunks on our side of the door paled in comparison to the noise waiting for us inside. Matilda stopped before the two bouncers. She gestured at one and then the other with a single finger. "Double sentry, allow us entry. Once inside, close the door, and remember no more." If I hadn't already been on the receiving end of the woman's spellcasting, I might have wondered at the effectiveness of her rhyming. But given what she'd done to me, it did not surprise me when one bruiser opened the door without a word while the other ushered us through. The door closed behind us, and that was that. "Nice trick," I said, shouting so she could hear me over the chaotic mixture of loud conversation, laughter, the distinctive melody of 3 separate musical troupes, and the gaming bells that rang with annoying regularity. "We are inside," she shouted back. "Now what?" "Now we look around." I fought back the urge to cringe as I took her hand. Hers was small and my own and cold, but the contact ensured we'd stay together while we slipped into the crowd. We let the natural ebbs and flows carry us deep into the realm of the gaming tables, where I felt compelled to stop to admire a roll of the dice. The man rolled poorly and lost, and the flip of a card. With 3 griffins already showing, it was a risky move, but the matron came out on top when the dealer presented her with a jester, before I guided us to the bar. I ordered for the both of us a pair of shamble shooters which went down like alchemical fuel and tasted about the same. I downed mine in one pull, tasting nothing, then smiled in satisfaction as Matilda tried to do the same, and coughed half of it back up. Served the woman right. Before Matilda had time to think up some new hex to place on me, I dragged her toward the fighting arena at the back of the establishment. This was the largest part of Ridlands, with the densest crowd yet, and with a match ongoing, the most noise. Fighting our way through the press of people, I caught nothing more than glimpses of the arena below, though I knew the fighting ring's layout and its legendary reputation well enough from past visits. Iron bars, rising a dozen feet, surrounded a ring 50 feet across. A single gate allowed entry. Once the combatants entered, the gate closed and stayed that way until one person remained standing. The fights weren't death matches, but that didn't mean someone didn't occasionally end up face down on the floor. It's hard to prevent when quarter is neither asked nor given. I didn't remember my previous visits to Ridlands with fondness, but the place held a few good memories of victorious gaming and stupendous bouts of overdrinking. I'd never been stupid enough to step into the arena. Well, almost never. There had been the one time. Youthful pride and bravado, fueled by the training I'd received up to that point from my mentor, Reuben Kariaktos, had led me to spill a man's blood on the arena floor. Back then, Ridlan had a fighter, fella he'd named Quick. Not very theatrical if you ask me, but it worked for Ridlan. Skinny bastard. Ridlan, not Quick. Liked to shoot his big mouth off about how many fights his guy had won and how no one had even come close to taking him down. I gave Quick his due then, and I'll do it now. The man had the fastest hands I'd ever seen, even to this day. He knew how to fight, too. If it hadn't been for Ridlan, Quick might still be alive, sitting at an esteemed corner table and basking in the glory of a long, successful fighting career. Instead, Ridlan had doomed the man by suggesting I had no chance against his boy. Bad blood already existed between me and Ridlan, so his words had only been the latest in a long list of salvos the skinny bastard had tossed my way. But it had been enough to get me in the ring. Approximately 12 seconds later, Quick was dead, and I'd made an enemy of Ridlan for life. Wooden floors yielded to soft sand as we neared the arena. Rabid spectators screaming for blood pressed against the iron bars with such density, it was difficult to see past them to make out the combatants. In truth, I wasn't all that interested, but I felt it necessary we keep up appearances. One didn't approach the fighting ring without taking an interest in the fight itself. We found a table away from the main area that gave us a good view of the ongoing match. Once settled, with 2 more drinks on the way, Matilda was gracious enough to order one of the finest bottles on Ridlan's wine list. I started scanning the area for Ridlan's employees, whose movements might help pinpoint the lab's entrance. One look at the fight inside the ring, however, and despite my earlier disinterest, I found I couldn't look away. 3 burly humans squared off against one equally burly dwarf. It had started as 4 against 1, but one man was already down, with enough blood pooled about his head that I doubted he would get back up soon. Each of the humans wore armor, breastplates, bracers, gauntlets, and vambraces, full helmets too. Their opponent, however, had no armor on at all except for a pair of metal gauntlets. Sweat glistened across his bare, muscled torso, and his dark hair and beard were each pulled into single braids. Presently, he was in a fighter's crouch, his 3 assailants circling him like hungry wolves. When they made their move, they did so all at once, their sudden attack eliciting a hearty roar from the crowd. The dwarf was at once engulfed by his larger opponents, preventing me from witnessing his response. I saw a blue flash emanating from within the ring of combatants, though. Each time the strange light flared, one of the human fighters staggered back until the dwarf was in plain view once more. His gauntlets, which immediately drew my attention, glowed with an azure light. The dwarf pressed his advantage, closing with the nearest fighter and directing one jab after another into the man's midsection. Each time a blow landed against the man's breastplate, the dwarf's gauntlets flared with blue brilliance. It looked like the dwarf was actually putting dents in the other's armor. Several more body shots, and finally one to the head, sent the dwarf's opponent to the floor. Not wasting a moment, the dwarf turned on the other 2 and treated them similarly. They tried to separate and come at him from different directions, but their maneuvering made them more vulnerable to the dwarf's unrelenting attack, which hardly allowed them an opportunity to counter. Even when they delivered a punch, which would have done considerable damage against their nearly unarmored opponent, the dwarf proved his footwork as good as his hands. Not a single blow of theirs connected. 2 opponents soon became 1. In any other ring, the dwarf's remaining adversary would have the option of surrender. Not so in Ridlin's arena. In the end, the man put up a reasonable effort, but the dwarf started in with another furious, blue-flaring assault, and that was it for him. When the last man hit the floor, the dwarf turned to the crowd with arms raised and a triumphant holler that incited the spectators to new heights of riotous bedlam. "Barbaric," Matilda said, sipping her wine, which our server had delivered during the height of the fight. I raised my glass, taking in the sweet smell before taking an entirely tasteless sampling of my own. "Agreed. But Ridlin's merely giving the people what they want. If not him, then someone else. It's a similar story with his drug manufacturing operation, the entrance to which I believe I have located. Over your shoulder, no, don't look, is a door manned by a pair of Ridlin's thugs. I believe our best chance of learning anything is to take that tour I mentioned. As luck had it, I'd done a job here once. It had been one of those knife to the jugular and passing sort of jobs, where the client wanted the mark executed in public for all to see. That sort of murder sends a statement, let me tell you, but it also announces my identity to anyone seeing me do the deed. Unless, of course, everyone is distracted. The place is dark, and the one doing the knifing is Alchester's premier assassin. I hadn't expected trouble, but one never knows, so I'd given the place my usual thorough attention, studying building plans and memorizing all entrances and exits. That was how I knew Ridlin's den had several basement-level rooms beneath where those 2 gents stood. From the plans, I remembered enough rooms to accommodate processing, packing, and whatever else was involved in manufacturing drugs and alchemicals. A lift connected the space to the building's rear loading dock. It was all very functional and tucked away nicely from the entertainment part of the den. I explained that to Matilda in a few terse sentences, then suggested we head in that direction. As we left the table, I placed my hand around Matilda's arm, leaned close, and said, "None of your mummery this time. Let me handle getting us past those goons." The crowd around the combat arena was dispersing now that the fight was over, allowing us to reach the door without the guards noticing us until we were right on top of them. I could have killed them both before either could blink, but I had something else in mind. "We're here to inspect the latest batch," I said, using my best tone of authority. One bruiser looked me up and down while the other took in Matilda. "Haven't seen either of you before," one guard said. The other crossed his arms and glared at us. What happened to the usual guy? Our Imperator has some concerns. When he has concerns, he lets the usual guy have the night off and sends us instead. "What concerns?" the one with his arms crossed asked. "You know," I said, gambling that he did. Operations like these always had one problem or another. I hoped one had been big enough that word had reached his level. The man let his arms fall to his sides, Look, the delay was one time and one time only. I thought my boss already made that clear to your boss. Maybe your boss wasn't convincing enough. In any case, we can't return to him without looking around. So, what do you say? I'm sure everything is progressing fine now, so we'll be on our way before you know it. After some thought, he shrugged his indifference. But I'll need a name to pass on before I let you in. It's Maines, I said. Compulsor Nathaniel Maines. The real Nathaniel Maines was dead, killed in an airship accident. Since he'd no longer had any use for his identity or his rank within the Warder organization, I didn't see any reason not to use it. The goon did an obvious double-take. Maines, you said? Too late, I realized using Maines's name might not have been the best decision after all. That's right. What about her? He nodded at Matilda. Her name's not important. He shrugged. Wait here. Then he turned to the door, knocking once. A speakeasy slid open, and the name I'd given was passed through. Next to me, Matilda shrank away. I placed a hand on her arm, my eyes never looking away from the other bruiser who hadn't put his back to us. We were committed now, no going back, and all that. We waited for all of 2 minutes before the door slid open. Inside, another bruiser was there, waving us in with a lift of his chin. The door closed behind us, and one of the men from outside and the one inside led us down a short hall to a stair that wound down one way and then the other. The steps continued, but they stopped us at the first subfloor and led us to a closed door at the end of another short hall. One of our chaperones opened the door for us, gesturing for us to go through while the other hovered behind us with fists clenched at his sides. Matilda walked past him and into whatever lay beyond without a second thought. I, however, paused to smile at the bruiser holding the door open. Let me guess. The real Nathaniel Maines has been here before, so you know what he looks like. You might even know that he's dead. I positioned myself so I had eyes on both of them. What's the plan, then? I looked from one to the other. I walk in. You shut the door behind me and we're locked up tight until Ridlin drags his skinny arse down here to see who the imposters are? Or does he keep us imprisoned until the next warder muckety-muck drops by for a visit? I shrugged. Doesn't matter, especially after I'm done with you two. Unless you want to take us to the lab? No? I didn't think so. That's too bad for you. It's a common misconception that size means something in a fight. I won't contest that if two men are engaged in a knockdown, drag-out contest, the larger opponent has the advantage. But I've always felt finesse trumps brute strength. Case in point, the bruiser on my right raised one arm to level a powerful, skull-crushing punch at me. I must admit, it was an impressive swing, but as I ducked beneath it, he found himself overextended and exposed to a blow of my own, which I put my entire body into. My fist smashed into his throat, sending him reeling back. I expected the other to come at me at that moment, which he did, but instead of ducking again, too predictable, I sidestepped him, grabbed his arm, and threw him past me. He spun around, thinking to continue his assault, when I grabbed his head from behind and slammed it into the wall. The sound of his skull cracking almost made me cringe. As he slumped to the floor, the other approached me with fists covering his face as if fighting in a boxing match. I let him jab once, twice, then I leaned into him, breaking his nose with a quick pop. While he tried to shake it off, I grabbed his head and introduced his face to my knee. He fell to the floor, not out, but not in any condition to get back up just then. Matilda stood in the doorway. Your plan is not working. They know we are imposters. Yes, but they also think we're locked up. We have 10 minutes, maybe more before someone comes down here and sees otherwise. I say we make the best of it. Let's go find this lab of theirs. I kicked the still conscious one in the face, sending him to dreamland, then dragged both into the room they'd meant to lock us in. Back at the stairs, we went down one level and then another, sneaking into a hall lined with closed doors. The door at the hall's other end stood out because it was larger than the others, and also because presently it was swinging open. Grabbing Matilda by the arm, I found the nearest unlocked door and shoved her through. I was right behind her. Luckily, only darkness and quiet greeted us. No one barged in to disturb us, so I figured we were safe for now. I found a wall lantern and turned it up just enough to take stock of our surroundings. I whistled. Now we have something to work with. Rows of lab coats hung on a rack, with other paraphernalia, including goggles, protective masks, gloves, and boots, stacked nearby. I put on a coat that looked about my size. It fit well enough, though the sturdy drab material added more dull than dash to my appearance. Without instruction, Matilda donned a coat of her own. We made an odd pair, with me far too handsome to play the role of a lab gremlin, and her too exotic, but such was the hand we'd been dealt, so I saw no reason not to play it. I arranged my long knives into a less prominent position at my belt, and Matilda helped herself to a pair of goggles, which she placed on her forehead. Then we exited the dressing room. Outside, the hall was empty, so we went for the door at the end, only to find it closed now and locked. "Let's see if anyone's home," I said, knocking 3 times. Another speakeasy slid open, at which point we found ourselves staring at another of Ridland's goons. He took one look at us in our lab coats, slammed the speakeasy closed, and let us in. Beyond, in all its glory, was Ridland's drug-making operation. Large vats on one side, a neat arrangement of tables covered with beakers and vials at the other, and a scattering of personnel busy throughout. That was all I had time to take in before a freckle-faced, pointy-nosed gentleman interposed himself between us and the possibility of taking another step forward. The man held his chin high and wrinkled his pointy nose as he said, "I don't know you. Who are you?" "Who we are is unimportant," I said, taking on an equally haughty tone. "What is important is that we are here to inspect the facility and see for ourselves that there will be no further delays." Leaning back, the man stuffed his hands into the pockets of his lab coat. "That was a one-time problem brought about by— Oh, never mind. You shouldn't be down here unescorted. I'm surprised someone didn't come down with you." The man at the door said it wouldn't be a problem. "You in charge down here?" Pointy Nose drew himself up. "That's right, Chief Alchemist Benedek. I think you'll find I run a clean and efficient laboratory. The delay we experienced last week was not the fault of this facility." "Oh? What was its nature, then? We weren't given many details." "I'm afraid I'll have to leave such explanations to Mr. Tamarack. My concern is the operation of the laboratory and nothing else. Speaking of which, we turned the lab over several hours ago. We do so 3 times a day. Currently, we are processing one of your batches. Distillate boilers, separation coils, and electrolysis synthesizers are all running nominally. Lab personnel regularly take samples at each stage for verification, and of course the final products are rigorously tested for quality control before anything leaves the facility. Really, I don't see the point in you looking anything over. I assure you, there's nothing to worry about." "We believe you, Chief Alchemist Benedek. It seems you do indeed run an efficient operation. However, since we're already here and because our superiors will want a report, how about we take a quick look around? Take a few notes and we'll be gone before you know it." Benedek let out a breath. "Very well, but please, touch nothing." After promising I wouldn't, I began my inspection, making a broad sweep of the room. I acted as if I was interested in each section of the lab and its equipment, when my focus was really on locating the exits. If things went sour, and they were likely to in a hurry, given present circumstances, we needed to know the quickest route out of here. So as I played at perusing the gauges on the boiler distillate vats and electrolysis synthesizers and peered over the shoulders of various lab gremlins, I made mental notes of several exits and, at the rear, the pulley-driven lift, currently grinding upward toward the building's loading dock. I spotted stevedores at the top, waiting to receive the goods, while 3 bored-looking guards hovered around the elevator's base. Other guards, I counted 5, stood at random positions throughout the room. Around the other side of the lift, workers boxed and loaded the facility's products. Everyone knew how Ridland distributed his drugs: pack them up in crates with legitimate goods, distribute the containers to specific locations throughout the city, then have block bosses take it from there. I imagined a similar process carried the warders' alchemicals to them. While I considered our chances of using the lift as an escape route, Matilda sauntered about, taking such an intense interest in the laboratory's operation and the lab gremlin's work that I wondered if she took our ruse a little too seriously. She had started with the closest boiler vat, studying the gauges and the slow rise of steam from each vessel. There were 3 massive cylinders, each with a cone top like a grain silo, and pipes leading in and out in a confusing jumble. Once Matilda had reached the last of the boilers, she moved over to the tables, using the same care to take in each detail as the alchemists tested the purity of the product and performed other duties that seemed to involve copious amounts of mixing, measuring, and, ultimately, the recording of results. Some gave Matilda curious glances, but figured she'd gotten past their chief alchemist, so they left her to her business. Mindful of the time we'd already spent here, and that our opportunity to discover anything of value was rapidly diminishing, I waved the chief alchemist over. He'd been hovering about, keeping a safe distance, but with an eye on us the whole time. "Everything looks in good order, Chief Alchemist. I applaud your operation. I only need one more thing. I'll need to see the shipping manifests. Word is that one wagon might have gone to the wrong location last time. I don't think either of us wants a repeat of that mistake." Benedek's expression tightened. "I've heard of no such mistakes. Are you certain?" "As you said, Mr. Tamrock doesn't give you all the details about what goes on outside your laboratory, but yes, I am certain. We checked on our end and found that the last shipment came up short. We investigated, discovered the error, and tracked the wagon down, so no harm was done, but we might not get so lucky next time. Now, it'll only take a moment to verify. I, unfortunately, do not have access to those records. Mr. Tamrock has someone else manage such logistics." "Do you know where I might find this gentleman, then?" "At this time of night? Upstairs at the loading dock, overseeing this evening's shipment. If you want to ask him, take the lift." He pointed at the lift as if I hadn't already seen it. "Ask for Sam." That was all I needed to hear. A document with an address would have been nice, but the next best thing is the man who knows the destinations of every one of Ridland's wagons. Sticking around any longer was neither necessary nor prudent. Any minute now, someone was going to find those men I'd knocked out, and shouts from outside the room preceded a loud thumping on the laboratory's main door. The guard there jumped from his stool and yanked the door open without bothering with the speakeasy this time. One of the bruisers I'd laid low, and 2 others came in. All 3 stopped, jaws clenched, while their gazes swept the facility. It didn't take them long to spot us. Or at least it didn't take them long to spot me. I looked around for Matilda, but she was nowhere to be seen. Though my first instinct was to escape, I couldn't leave without the witch since I needed her to remove the curse. As the guards at the door started in my direction while shouting for the others manning the lift to get me, I calmly removed my lab coat. Chief Alchemist Benedek realized what was happening and carefully stepped away from me. I ignored him. At my back, the lift was on its way down. Lab gremlins, their faces buried in their work, looked up, trying to ascertain the cause for alarm. All over the lab, one guard after another took their cue from the 3 who'd busted in and closed on my position. Looking past them, I realized I'd missed at least another 3 guards, bringing their total number to 11. Though the odds against me seemed daunting, I knew a trick or two that might help swing them in my favor, not least of which included making a bold, bloody statement right from the start. I'd no doubt Ridland paid his men well, but well enough to forfeit their lives? No time like the present to find out. Drawing my long knives, I was lowering myself into a fighting crouch when I spotted Matilda facing the distilling vats. Though she looked more lab gremlin than intruder with her goggles covering her eyes now, Chief Alchemist Benedek spotted her anyway. "Stop her!" he screeched as he pointed a finger at her. "She's one of them." A guard came around one vat at a run. Matilda turned her head, and nothing else, toward him. Sans the clever rhymes this time, the witch raised a hand with curled fingers and swiped the air before him. The effect of her diablerie was swift and immediate. He screamed, lifting his hands to his face as blood poured out between his fingers. Everyone stopped, frozen with horror at what the witch had done. Matilda may have beaten me to my intended bold and bloody statement, but that didn't mean I couldn't take advantage of the opportunity. Damn near surrounded now, I chose my first victim at random, dazzling the poor man with a knife display that quickly left him dead on the floor. 2 more guards fell in to take his place, which worked out since I had 2 knives drawn. Each of my blades was 1.5 feet of razor-sharp steel, their reach and my skill more than sufficient to send the pair skittering back. I kept up the pressure, but more guards joined the fray, forcing me to yield ground. Even in retreat, I kept my poise, knocking their clumsy attacks away with little effort. More bruisers circled my position, until I counted 7. No, 8, all around me. No doubt about it, this was turning into one hell of a fight, or it might have if Matilda hadn't chosen that moment to turn the world upside down. She faced the vats with arms lifted. Over the shouts of the guards and the panicked commotion of the lab gremlins, I heard her chanting the same pattern over and over. 2 guards had gone to deal with her, but the sight of what she'd done to the other one, who lay quietly crumpled on the floor now, stopped them well short of her. Or maybe it was the boilers, which emitted hot steam now like an engine running full throttle. More than the vats were affected by her magic. On the tables, alchemical liquids frothed and boiled, powders ignited, and gases swirled and billowed inside their enclosures. But whatever nefarious spell she worked affected the steaming vats the worst. They shuddered and groaned, the pressure inside them rising to hazardous levels. Some scientists tried to get to pressure release valves or some such things, but it was already too late. Someone yelled for everyone to get out. The floor shook as if an earthquake had taken hold, and then a boom resounded with such force that anyone standing was knocked to the floor. Only a few of my opponents remained on their feet. I almost fell as well, but I am nothing if not a master of balance. A master of ducking, too, especially when I spied a wave of green alchemical flame and smoke hurtling my way. I hit the deck. Those already on their knees made it, too. But anyone who didn't drop fast enough? As they were set ablaze, their shrieks told me all I needed to know about their fate. Shaking off the ringing in my ears and the screaming of those set on fire, I regained my feet. Next to me, a guard tried to do the same. I kicked him in the face, sending him back down, but I nearly regretted the effort as my head swooned and I almost went down with him. Matilda was dead. She'd been too close to the vats when they'd exploded, so I figured the woman walking toward me through the unnatural emerald flames and greenish smoke was her ghost. The old gods knew the woman, even alive, looked like the walking dead, so to assume so of the figure before me wasn't a far stretch. Yet when she grabbed me by the arm, pushing me toward the ruin of the cargo lift, I was forced to reassess her present vitality. Such thoughts proved burdensome in my current state, as did walking, so I was glad for Matilda's support. Halfway to our destination, an overzealous guard got in our way. Matilda drew her small sword and neatly ran him through. Then we reached the lift, which I saw was no longer operational. Knocked completely off its rails, it had come crashing down and now lay more out of position than in. "What the hell did you do?" I asked, shaking loose from the witch's grasp as my wherewithal returned. "I sent a message." Matilda looked up. "We'll have to climb." The lift's lattice work was a mess, so much so that I felt compelled to look back through the emerald haze toward the room's primary entrance. "We cannot go that way. I cannot protect you from the flames. Besides, we need to find Sam." Realizing she was right and not bothering to ask how she knew about Sam when she hadn't been present when Benedek had told me about him, I asked, "You want to go first?" She did not, so I took point. Though I'd shaken off most of the effects of the explosion, Matilda hovered close as if concerned I might fall. Below, others noticed us and followed, hoping to escape the burning laboratory. The latticework groaned from the extra strain but held long enough for us to reach the top. Though the emerald smoke had risen this far, it was not yet thick enough to obscure the 5 stevedores waiting to greet us. 2 wore ventilator masks, hiding their features, but I imagined their expressions matched those of the other 3, who each looked as if they were ready to kill someone. "Gentlemen," I said, pulling myself the rest of the way up to stand on tired, wobbly legs, "we're looking for Sam." The response from one of them was a meaty right hook meant to knock me cold. With no room to back up, I lunged forward, effecting a clumsy somersault that cleared me of the man's fist, but did nothing to keep another of the men from whacking me with his club. My left arm went numb from the blow, so I drew only one long knife as I exited my role and stood. Another came at me, but got a face full of smoke instead. He fell into a fit of coughing. The one with the club, who had the benefit of a mask, tried for me again. I blocked his first blow, dodged the next, then ran him through before he had a chance at a third. The sight of blood proved too much for one worker, who chose that moment to run. As he passed, the other masked man made a play, swinging his dagger for my midsection. I backed away, preparing a counterattack, when the point of a small sword thrust out from his chest. As the man crumpled to the floor, Matilda slid her blade free. That proved too much for the others. One ran, getting away clean, but the other stumbled, allowing me time to stand between him and escape. The man held up his hands. "I don't want no trouble." "You Sam?" I asked. Matilda walked around him to stand by my side. "No, sir," the guard said. He pointed at the second man to die. "Sam's the one she just ran through." Matilda cursed under her breath. I walked over to the dead man and poked him with my toe. "I think he's past helping us." Matilda crossed her arms, scowling. "What do we do? Any chance you can bring Sam back long enough for us to get what we need from him?" I was only half serious, but Matilda's expression turned thoughtful, as if contemplating the possibility. The stevedore looked from one of us to the other with eyes gone wide. I gestured with my knife toward the exit, which I saw through the smoke and a maze of crates, before putting the weapon away. "You can leave." The stevedore didn't need to be told a second time. I turned my attention back to Matilda. "Never mind about what I said. I have a better idea. Follow me." We were almost outside the loading dock when a group of men ran into the alley behind Ridland's den. I pulled Matilda close and whispered at her to act hurt. "There's wounded in there," I said, pointing back the way we'd come. "Down in the lab, too." They passed us by without a second thought. Outside, a pair of half-loaded wagons and a handful of kitchen staff occupied the alley. No one tried to stop us as I led Matilda around the building to the front, where a growing mass of people stumbled out from Ridland's den or stood in small groups, wondering what had happened. We saw no fire or smoke, but the explosion must have rocked the entire building enough to send every drunk or drugged-up patron scurrying for safety. "Find the center of attention," I said to Matilda, leading her deep into the heart of the crowd. "We're looking for Ridland." We found him pinned down by the verbal assault of two well-to-do gentlemen not pleased with the sudden need to dash from the building. A single bodyguard stood close, his attention spread so thin across the sea of people surrounding his employer that I had no trouble slipping in and braining Ridland with the hilt of one of my smaller knives. The skinny weasel never knew what hit him, going down without a whimper of protest. My sudden attack caused the two gentlemen to jump back, clearing enough space for me to grab Ridland around the waist and drag him into the crowd. Matilda waited ahead of me, somehow parting the mass of people to make our passage easier. It closed up quickly behind us, ensuring anyone following was not going to have an easy time of it. We took Ridland to an alley a few blocks away. For such a skinny man, his weight wore on me, so it was with some relief that I finally let him slump to the ground. Crouching, I put Ridland's back to the wall and slapped his cheek. "Time to wake up, Ridland." It took 2 more slaps before he regained consciousness. Grogginess faded quickly as his eyes went wide with recognition. "Good," I said. "You remember me." He struggled to say something, but too many curses must have come to mind for him to get a single one out. "Look, Ridland, we don't want to hurt you. We just want information." My use of the word "we" drew his attention to Matilda, who hovered over him with arms crossed and an expression of intense scrutiny on her face. An all-too-familiar screech sounded as Matilda's crow sailed down to land on his mistress's shoulder. His arrival didn't faze Ridland, who had eyes only for me presently. "You!" he snarled, probably hoping his burning glare would set me on fire. "I'm sure you'd like to reminisce about old times, Ridland, but since we're on a tight schedule, I'll make this easy for you." I slid a knife out, letting him get a good look at the blade. "Shiny, isn't it? It won't stay like that, though, with your blood all over it. You can avoid that by answering a simple question." Ridland opened his mouth wide. "Help! Help me!" I silenced him with a slap across the jaw, then placed my blade at his throat. "Ridland, you know what I do for a living, right? You must also know I don't like you. So why tempt me?" "It was you, wasn't it? Despite the proximity of my steel to his jugular, he shook with rage. "You blew up my building!" "Not the entire building, just the lab." I let that sink in. He needed to know that things weren't as desperate as they seemed, that he still had something to lose. "Sorry, Ridlin. Business will be bad for a while. But look at the bright side. If you walk out of this alley alive, you can rebuild. All you have to do is answer a simple question. Ready?" He didn't respond, but neither did he cry out again. "Good. Now, we know you've been working with the warders. You probably did business with one of their imperators, and might have even known a compulsor named Nathaniel Maines or an imperator named Phalophogus. Both are dead now, but that's beside the point. You've been processing alchemicals for the warders and sending them somewhere. We want to know where." Ridlin's eyes roved to Matilda and the crow resting on her shoulder. "Don't worry about her, Ridlin. Yes, she's as crazy as she looks, but she doesn't have to become a part of this. Now answer the question." "I don't have any idea what you're talking about." I sighed. Withdrawing the knife from his neck, I plunged it straight into his thigh. I let him scream for all of 2 seconds before I took hold of him by the throat, leaving the knife in his leg. "It hurts, but won't cause any serious damage. An inch lower and I could cripple you for life. An inch higher and you'd bleed out long before anyone found you. I'll ask one more time, Ridlin. What's the delivery address?" He shook his head, pressing his lips firmly together. I yanked my knife from his leg, holding it poised for another go. I looked at him expectantly, waiting. "I can't tell you. You know that. If I do, word will get out that I give up my clients and I'd be done. I know you know what that means." "Of course," I said. "But you're about to be done right now. So talk." Again he shook his head. "Might as well kill me. If I tell you anything, I'm good as dead anyway." "There are fates far worse than death," Matilda said, crouching beside me with that idiotic crow still on her shoulder. The bird's eyes, liquid pools of copper, looked my way, and the damn thing opened his beak wide and chortled. Ridiculing me, I imagined, because I'd failed to extract the information we needed. "You, truly the stupidest name I'd ever heard," hopped onto the top of Ridlin's head. Ridlin looked up with widened eyes, but he made no move to unseat the bird. Not with Matilda hovering so close and now leaning in so that he had no choice but to lose himself in her depthless green eyes. "You do not need to tell us anything," she said, her gaze locked with his. "You needn't say another word." "I don't?" I gave the woman a sidelong glance, wondering what she was up to. "No, you do not," she said, placing her open palm on the man's forehead. Hoodoo. That was what she was up to. I stood and backed away, lest whatever she was about to do somehow rubbed off on me. I didn't feel sorry for Ridlin. He was a drug-dealing arsehole and deserved whatever fate the witch had in store for him. I just hoped whatever she was planning worked. "We needn't waste your time or ours with words when there are much easier ways of extracting information. Now lie still as I pull the thoughts from your mind. Relax. Think of fond memories. Make your last thoughts good ones." You shifted on the man's head, ruffling his feathers and opening his beak, though he made no sound this time. "Last thoughts?" Ridlin asked, his voice sounding far away. "Last and final. When I am through with you, your mind will stand empty, like a jug emptied of water. What remains will be dry and barren. But fear not. More thoughts may be poured in over time, refilling the vessel. But your memories and experiences before tonight will be gone forever." "No thought," Ridlin said, "or memory." "That is correct." "What do you mean, no memories?" Ridlin squealed, trying to push himself up. Matilda's other hand shot out, gripping Ridlin's arm. "Remain still, unless you wish to come out of this experience a raving lunatic." Ridlin went slack, though the wildness in his eyes remained. "You can't do this. I mean, who are you? You're no sorceress. You're bluffing. You have no power over me." "Am I? Don't I? Then stand and leave." Matilda removed both hands and leaned back on her heels, waiting for Ridlin to do as she asked. He tried, his torso wiggling back and forth, but his legs remained motionless, and his arms pinned to his side as if tied up. Still on top of the man's head, Yu flapped his wings and squawked. The entire predicament was humorous enough that I had to laugh. "What did you do to me?" Ridlin continued to struggle, to no avail. "Release me!" The witch returned her hand to his forehead, her touch stopping his struggles. "We've no more time to waste. You are correct that I am not a sorceress. I am something far worse. Now you will yield the information I need." Matilda closed her eyes and began chanting. "Wait!" Ridlin said, his voice shrill. "I'll tell you what you want to know. I'll tell you anything. Just stop. Oh, please, stop." His head was frozen in place, but his eyes turned to me. "Please, make her stop." I crossed my arms. "I'm sure she will if you tell us what we want to know." "I'll tell you, I will." Stepping closer, I loomed over him. "Then tell us already." "The warders came to me a couple of months back after the explosion at..." I kicked him. "We didn't ask for a history lesson, Ridlin. Where are you shipping the alchemicals?" He swallowed and nodded. "You heard of the Lazy Minstrel?" I had. It was one of my favorite establishments, though it had been some time since I'd enjoyed its ambiance or lack thereof. It wasn't the finest of wine shops in the city, but neither was it the worst. The minstrel's owner, Ophelia, was a good woman, so I never minded spending my coin there. But it was hardly the place one expected to take receipt of dangerous alchemicals. I hoped Ophelia hadn't gotten herself mixed up with the warders. I'd hate to have to kill her. "Yes, I've heard of it," I said. "You trying to tell me the warders are having their alchemicals delivered to a tavern?" That's where they wanted them brought. Not inside, but out back. They were very specific. We leave the wagon there, then their driver takes over. Damn warders and their secrecy. "So you're telling us you don't know where the alchemicals wind up?" This was turning into a damn waste of time. Matilda's hand on Ridlin's arm tightened. "There is something more he is not telling us. Let us see." "No! Wait! There is more, and I'll tell you what it is, but please don't." Matilda relaxed her grip. "I got curious after a while, so I had the wagon followed. They're taking the shipments to a warehouse over by the airship docks. Warehouse 15 is the one." Matilda looked at me expectantly, awaiting confirmation that I knew the place. I didn't know the exact warehouse, but I knew the area well enough that I didn't expect trouble finding it. I gave her a nod. Standing, she slapped hands together and said, "We are done here." She walked off. "You, get off the man's head." The crow squawked once, then spread its wings and took flight. He soared from the alley to circle above. "Wait," Ridlin said to her back. "I can't move." When Matilda didn't slow down or even acknowledge his dilemma, his gaze shot to me. I gave him a shrug. "I'm sure it'll wear off eventually." I started to follow Matilda, then stopped. "Make sure you think twice about coming after me over this, Ridlin. You know whoever you send will fail, and that I'll pay you a visit when he does." I didn't wait around for a response. Once I'd caught up to Matilda, she asked, "What is your plan for getting us inside the warehouse?" "Plan? I haven't even seen the place, so how could I have a plan? But once I have one, it will not include you." "This again?" She threw up her hands. "You will not leave me behind." "This time is different. Look, Ridlin's flunkies were easy to fool, but an organization like the Warders is more than careful. They'll know every name and face working for them. They'll spot us before we even got a second foot through the door." She thought it over while we kept walking, and, evidently agreeing with me, asked, "What will you do then?" "I'll go in alone. I'm good at getting in and out of places undetected. It's part of what I do for a living, after all. But I'll need to make a detour first to get some new clothes. Clothes, mask, cloak, armor, and a full array of weapons. You can come with me, or we can meet in an hour near the docks. Once there, I'll slip inside the warehouse and look around." Matilda stopped. "And if you see the primus?" I sighed. It was time to enlighten Matilda to the realities of the situation. "Look, the chances of finding the primus in the warehouse are about as close to zero as you can get. Someone that important probably has better things to do. Perhaps, or perhaps not. But if you find him, do not kill him unless I am present." Any particular reason? Because I need to see the light fade from his eyes as his life leaves him. I must see this myself to ensure he is truly gone. Is that because you don't trust me? You think I'll make up a story, claim I took him out when I didn't? I trust you as much as you trust me, which I imagine is very little. But that is not the reason. What then? Tell me. I was genuinely curious what impetus had prompted this woman to get so involved, sending her crow to watch over me, making deals with the jackery, and coming along tonight as if she had a personal stake in the machinations of the warders. I wondered if they'd done something to her. They have done nothing to me, nor did they have any reason to single me out before tonight. Stay out of my head, will you? So you're making yourself a target for no reason. If I do nothing, I become a target. We all do. Meaning? Meaning, as I have already told you, I have seen what fate the warders have in store for this city and every living thing within its walls. I have called upon the dark spirits, and they have shown me the destruction the warders intend to bring down on all of us. They mean to summon a dragon with fire and brimstone pouring from its... A dragon? You didn't mention that before. Yes, breathing fire and brimstone and... Did these dark spirits literally show you a dragon, or was it more of a symbol? Something with two shapes, one inside the other? The outer with 10 sides and the inner, 10 points, like a star? Matilda narrowed her gaze. That describes what I saw, yes. It is a symbol known to my kind as Dracogonus, the symbol of the dragon, which means fire, brimstone, and... Decimation, I said. It means decimation. Smoldering eyes scrutinized me. How do you know this? A friend of mine saw it in a book that belonged to a warder imperator. We didn't know what it meant at first, but an associate of ours enlightened us. This person's conclusion? Matilda asked. Like you said, fire and brimstone. Then you understand why I wish to see the warder primus dead. His death will leave the organization without a leader. With them in disarray, I can turn my attention toward the jackery and their head priest, Onias. She was nothing if not ambitious. Let me guess. The spirits warned you about them too. No, but it is plain as day they wish our city harm, is it not? I knew enough about the jackery not to argue that point. You care about Alchester so much you're willing to make enemies of the warders and the zealots? What happens if you fail? What do you think they'll do to you? Matilda stood a little straighter, and I swear her emerald eyes flared. I do not intend to fail. She turned away, walking in the general direction of the airship docks. We've wasted enough time in idle chit-chat. We are running out of moonlight. Go get what you need. I will meet you at the docks. She rattled off the name of an intersection from over her shoulder, not stopping or looking back to see if I even knew the location. I did, of course, so I said nothing as I watched her leave. Shoving my hands into my trouser pockets, I went to the place I kept in the shambles, emerging a brief time later from the tenement dressed all in black, hooded cloak, padded tunic, arm bracers, gloves, and a mask open only at the eyes. I had my usual long knives and a plethora of smaller blades at my belt, boots, and hidden inside the bracers. I was a firm believer in the notion that one could never have too many weapons on one's person. One of my gloves was just a glove, but the other was a force glove, a gift for a job well done. The force glove had proven its worth repeatedly, so I'd made it part of my standard gear. I found Matilda waiting in the shadows at the appointed location. Though my approach had been whisper quiet, she still turned toward me before I announced my presence. "You are late," she said, her arms crossed and a pinched expression dominating her features. Behind her, the city's illuminated docking towers provided a majestic view, which she did not appear to have been enjoying. From a nearby lamppost, her crow let out a too loud squawk. "Quiet, you!" Matilda hissed. Yes, quiet, stupid bird. We were far enough away from the warehouse to not attract attention, but not so far we wanted our presence announced. "Are we agreed on the plan?" I asked. "You and your bird. Stay here. I go in alone. If there's a reason for you to go inside, I'll come back to get you." Matilda chewed her lip a bit before answering, but she agreed. Without further ceremony, I got on with the business at hand. Warehouses by the airship docks were segmented into two types, somewhat unprotected and somewhat overprotected. It didn't surprise me that the one the warders occupied fell into the latter category, surrounded by a 10-foot wall with two slender watchtowers at opposite sides of the building. Breaching it even after days of planning still would have presented a challenge. Getting in tonight with no idea of the number of guards, inside or out, no knowledge of their watch patterns, and not knowing anything about what to expect once inside, it was damn near impossible. I purposely had said nothing to Matilda about that. Impossible or not, I meant to give it my best effort. Who knew? Maybe I'd get lucky and make it inside. Regardless of how far I made it, I considered this an opportunity to gather information I meant to pass on to Liz to use in her fight against the warders. Everyone won, it seemed, as long as I got in and out alive. My first move was to figure out a way inside. With that in mind, I chose another warehouse a distance away, but high enough that, once lying flat on the roof, I could see over the wall and into a yard that wrapped around the main structure. Dim lights shone at regular intervals about the building, lighting the way for guards who patrolled the grounds in a counterclockwise pattern. Waiting for them to make a complete circuit, I counted 8 sentries. Their spacing was such that at least 2 had line of sight on one another at any given time, which meant each side of the building was continually under observation by at least one pair. The towers were dark, presenting no movement within, though I expected at least 1 sentry, maybe 2, occupied each. Doorways into the main building were limited, and those I saw were closed and most likely barred from within. I'd expected locked doors, but sentries on watch in such a precise pattern suggested something else. Something was going on inside that warehouse, something I intended to find out more about. The heightened security made my job more difficult, but not impossible. I briefly considered returning to Matilda to see if she could witch me up a distraction, but dismissed the idea given the possibility she might burn the entire warehouse down. Better to think of something else. Killing a guard, even unseen, did me no good, since it wouldn't take long for the next closest to notice the gap in their ranks. A stealthy entrance seemed my only recourse. But how to remain unseen when the space between each guard was constantly under observation? Situations like these were exactly why I preferred to scope a job out over days, not minutes. But I was here now, and since giving up wasn't my style, I focused on each aspect of the scene before me, including the lighting, the spots of unmitigated darkness, and the precise movement of the guards. Just because someone had started them on a synchronous march didn't mean they'd stay that way. After about 30 minutes, I noticed 2 things. One sentry walked too fast and another too slow. The former's hustle narrowed the gap with the one in front of him while widening it behind. The slower gent, who was posted clear on the other side of the building, did the opposite, too wide in front and narrow in back. Admonishments from other sentries sped up or slowed down each guard, but it wasn't long before the pattern repeated. I hardly blamed them. Walking around a building in the cold of night where 99 times out of 100 nothing ever happened was the very definition of boredom. I shifted my attention back to the pair of towers. Both remained shrouded in darkness, though prolonged scrutiny of the closer one yielded signs of movement from a lone individual. I'd have to gamble that the other held only a single occupant. I studied the men on the ground for another 15 minutes before the plan I had in mind satisfied me. Then I came down from my perch, positioning myself outside the compound's wall, so I had a straight run toward the closest tower. Since I no longer had line of sight on the guards or their movements, I wasn't sure when to make my move. I counted out the seconds, though, arranging the guards' positions in my mind while making what I thought was a good estimate of their movement. Then I ran for the wall closest to the tower. Even at a full sprint, I didn't make a sound. At the base of the wall, I crouched low, waiting 10 seconds while I listened for any sign they'd seen my approach. Nothing. I started up the wall, using irregular stones and mortared gaps to gain finger and toe holds. When I could peer over the top of the wall, I stopped to take stock of the current position of the sentries. I'd timed it well. The slow one had just rounded the far corner. In front of him, the other had rounded the nearer corner, so the slow guard was all alone on his side of the warehouse. Once I made my move, I was a goner if he looked in my direction with any measure of scrutiny. but I was counting on the man's apathy. Anyone who dragged their feet that much clearly had his mind elsewhere. Boredom meant sloppiness, giving me a halfway decent chance of succeeding. A short jump from the top of the wall to the nearest tower's latticed support beams sent nary a quiver up the structure. In short order, I climbed to the top of the tower. Slipping a knife free, I waited until the guard had his back to me. Then I hoisted myself inside. The guard spun around, finally aware of my presence, but too late to do anything about it other than die with my blade jabbed into his throat. Damn messy business, making a stab like that, but it was the best way to keep him silent while making sure he died quickly. As I lowered the guard to the floor, waiting while he wheezed out his last breath, I realized I'd mistaken his, or rather, her, gender. The guard was a woman, a brawny one, but a woman nonetheless. She had close-cropped dark hair, a heavy coat to protect against a long nighttime watch, and now, blood leaking from her neck and bubbling from her mouth. Nothing about her stood out except for an odd pair of green-lensed goggles fastened over her eyes. Curious, I removed the goggles and used them to peer down into the yard. Through those lenses, which tinted everything green, the warehouse, sentries, and the other tower across the way appeared as plain as day. I saw that someone had prompted the slow-moving guard to get a move on since he was back in formation. The warehouse remained as quiet as before, and the other watchtower. I ducked, realizing that if one tower sentry had these special goggles, the other likely did too. No alarm bell rang, though as I crouched inside the tower, I heard a faint banging that sounded like a hammer striking metal. I listened until I realized the sound originated from the inside of the warehouse and, for now, presented no threat. Once I'd fastened the goggles around my head, I saw no reason not to take advantage of them. I lowered myself from the tower the same way I'd come up, then settled into the shadows at the inside base of the wall. Even if the guard stationed inside the other tower wore the same goggles, the building obstructed what I was about to do next. Timing was everything in a situation like this, so I waited until the fast guard came around the building's corner before moving. He was almost halfway down the building's side when I padded in behind him and started my ascent. Once more, the gaps between the irregular stones provided ample locations for me to gain a hold. I had to climb quickly before the next guard walked around the corner and before the fast guard spotted me, but as I slid onto the roof with no alarm raised, I knew I'd made it undetected. No one had bothered to post rooftop sentries, so gaining entry to the inside of the warehouse appeared a trivial task. Still, I remained wary of the guard posted at the other tower, so I stayed behind rooftop vents and hatches until I found a suitable entry point via a locked skylight window. Once I had my lock-picking tools back in their pouch at my belt, I carefully swung the window open partway, then lowered myself to the rafters inside. The building was large but open, so I didn't need to creep far to take in everything below. The entire place was a bedlam of furious activity. In one corner, stevedores unloaded a wagon holding crates that looked identical to the kind used by Ridlin. The wagon must have left the den before Matilda blew up the laboratory. Lab workers and their alchemical equipment occupied another area. A third section seemed devoted to building and construction, with carpenters and metalworkers creating such a general ruckus that I knew this was the source of the hammering I'd heard from outside. A large structure that might be an office took up the last of the available space. The activity below showed promise. While I'd no reason to believe the primus was down there, it was a far better possibility now than if I'd found an empty warehouse. Regardless, I had the larger goal of learning everything I could about the warders to help Atticus in Liz's endeavor. I removed my goggles, whose unique properties were no longer needed, and settled in to learn all about this operation. It started with the unloading area, where newly arrived containers were placed onto a roller-lined conveyor belt. The belt moved the containers to a processing area where workers opened and unloaded their contents. Such contents included small barrels loaded onto another conveyor, then moved to one more area, where people I took for alchemists by their dress and protective masks carefully carried each barrel to a series of vats for further processing. Pipes connected the vats to a long line of paraphernalia, where alchemists monitored the entire process from one end to the other. Through a haze of smoke and steam, I saw others collecting the resulting output mixture in small glass vials. The alchemists wore gloves and used tongs to place each vial into a single, straw-filled crate. Workers then loaded each box into one of several transport wagons. On the other side of the loading area was a brougham. The carriage was of fine wooden construction and painted an inconspicuous black. No animal stood before it. At the rear, quiet steam drifting from twin vertical exhaust pipes identified the carriage as an unconventional, alchemically fueled, mechanically driven model. The brougham was empty, but a smartly dressed driver stood beside it with the passenger door open. Nearby, two men casually dressed in waistcoats and shirts with rolled-up sleeves stood shoulder to shoulder with a dark-haired woman who wore an alchemist's drab but functional lab coat. The three faced a fourth person, who remained out of view on the carriage's other side. Whatever conversation the three warders were engaged in with the unknown person or persons ended when a dwarf emerged from the enclosed office. Though the distance from our table to the fighting ring at Ridland's had been too great to make out specific features, I knew this was the same dwarf we had witnessed take on four heavily armored men with only his gauntleted fists. What gave him away were those strange gauntlets hanging from his belt. They weren't glowing now, but I easily recognized them by their size and metallic pattern. No longer shirtless, he'd changed into a simple tunic and leather trousers. The dwarf headed for the carriage, but he moved at a snail's pace. I wasn't sure why, since he was unburdened except for a small metal chest. Despite its size, his arms, whose strength I'd witnessed firsthand, quivered from the effort of holding it. At his appearance, the three warders went silent, their attention turning as one toward the dwarf's approach. One man stepped forward, presumably to lend a hand, but the dwarf shook him off. He navigated around the brougham, then made his way step by step with agonizing slowness to the open carriage door, whereupon the dwarf stepped up and into the vehicle. The carriage sagged and rocked from the added weight before settling on its springs. The trio of warders moved to the open-door side of the carriage, as did the mystery person to whom they'd been speaking. My grip on the rafters grew tighter, or maybe I was trying to clench my hand into a fist, for I knew this person and not in a good way. Luxurious blonde hair, a figure that turned men's heads a block away, and a mean streak that ran so deep she'd killed her own brother to gain control of her precious progressive society. Gwendolyn Goddard. I met Gwendolyn while attending a gala event sponsored by the Society for the Progression of Science and Technology. Under the guise of Thomas Thornton, a businessman with a keen interest in the Society's futuristic work, I'd offered to help Gwendolyn with a bit of a tricky situation that she'd gone and made trickier by doing in her brother and many other high-ranking Society members. She had yet to gain complete control of the Society, but my unwitting assistance had gotten her one step closer to that goal. Since that first misadventure together, she'd made sure her blackguard mercs harried my every move. The guard wanted me dead anyway for pruning their ranks, so they needed little encouragement. Though as I understood it, Gwendolyn wanted me alive for reasons unknown. The blackguard's captain, Geoffrey Belford, had told me as much not too long ago while attempting to capture me. I was of half a mind to drop to the warehouse floor to confront Ms. Goddard. I didn't see any black guardsmen about to protect her, which was strange. Even stranger, though, was the question of why she was here in the first place. If the Progressive Society and the Warders had allied their interests, then the trouble each organization posed to our fair city just increased significantly. I realized someone needed to warn Atticus. Atticus had taken a stand against the Warders, but he was also uniquely positioned within the Society as the sole person capable of wresting control away from Gwendolyn. If she'd formed a union with the Warders, then the pendulum might have swung too far in Miss Goddard's favor for Atticus to recover. Seeing Ms. Goddard invoked other memories of the night we'd cavorted about the city together, and as the dwarf stepped from the carriage sans the chest, I realized I knew him as well. We'd met only briefly after he and his sister had completed a demonstration of a new type of armor they were developing under the patronage of the Progressive Society. Raid Lendon, full-time engineer and part-time boxer, it seemed, engaged the Warders and Gwendolyn in conversation. Hoping to catch some of their exchange, I crept across the rafters in their direction, but their dialogue was too brief. The dwarf stepped back and, with a final nod to Ms. Goddard, got back into the mechanical transport. The driver closed the door behind him. Then he mounted the steering bench where another man, this one thick around the chest and arms, joined him. With a lurch, the brougham rolled forward. The warehouse's main door slid open, and the carriage wheeled into the night. Gwendolen stayed behind, moving on to other business. I turned about and made for my exit. On the roof, I stayed out of sight while timing the movement of the circling guards once more. It took too long, but as soon as an opening presented itself, I descended from the warehouse and made my way outside the walls. I ran straight for the place I'd left Matilda. She was still there, leaning against a wall with arms crossed and you nestled on her shoulder. My sudden appearance spooked the bird, but not Matilda, who was ready with questions. "Did you identify the primus?" she asked. "Did you kill him? You better not have." With no time to explain, I took her by the elbow and led her on what I hoped was an intercept course with the dwarf and his carriage. I had no idea about the mechanized transport's destination, but only so many thoroughfares led away from the airship docks. Graham's Way was viable since it cut across many of those main avenues. As we hurried down it, I filled Matilda in on what I'd seen. I left out the sordid details about Miss Goddard and our earlier history, mainly relating the threat and alliance between the society and the warders posed, and that we needed to know more about the chest. We moved fast, but not fast enough since we should have crossed paths with the carriage already. Yet as we moved further and further away from the airship docks, there was no sign of it. "We should backtrack," I said, stopping. "We must have missed it." Matilda held out an arm, a ready perch for you who'd flown away when I'd first taken hold of his mistress. Now the crow landed lightly, settling his wings as he tilted its head to look at me with his usual mocking stare. "I have a better idea," Matilda said. "Describe the carriage to you." "You want me to do what?" "Hurry up and do it. Our quarry is getting away." I did as she asked. As soon as I'd finished, Matilda whispered something meant for her familiar's ears only. "You took to the air where the night sky soon swallowed him." "Now," Matilda said, "we wait." Realizing what she was up to, I settled in. We hadn't waited long when you returned. He squawked something unintelligible to me, but whatever it was prompted Matilda to take the lead this time, guiding us away from Graham's Way onto a series of side streets and less used avenues. You took off again to fly overhead. Of course, now that I thought about it, it made sense that the transport would stay off the main roads. Nothing about the carriage smacked of illegality, but why take the chance of running into a cobble-stomper patrol with a too-curious sergeant looking to make a point? We found the brougham setting a modest pace down Varneel Way, a strip so narrow it hardly deserved a street name. We'd come out ahead of the carriage from an alleyway, which gave us a moment to strategize. It turned out Matilda already had a plan. "I will stop the transport. Then, while I supply a distraction, you will steal the chest. We will rendezvous after." Before I had time to say a word, she was back on the street and already in plain view of the brougham's driver. She raised both arms, urging the carriage to stop or preparing a spell to make it do so. The driver pulled back on a lever and made some other adjustments to the controls, slowing the brougham. Once it had come to a complete stop, he stood, his mouth open to speak, but he was superseded by Raid, who stuck his head out a side window and asked, "Why the hell are we stopped?" Bushy eyebrows narrowed when he saw Matilda standing in the road. The carriage door opened, and out he came, gauntlets no longer hanging from his belt, but fitted onto his mallet-like fists. The two men manning the steering bench jumped down while the smartly dressed driver went to stand by the carriage door. The other one, whose tight shirt put his enormous size on full display, followed the dwarf with a club in hand. Dispensing entirely with any possibility of chit-chat, Matilda said, "You will surrender your cargo. You will do so now." Not surprisingly, her ultimatum was not well received. Raid slammed one gauntleted fist into the other, causing a spark of azure energy to flare, while the other slapped a more conventional club into his open palm. I'd seen the damage Matilda caused when she put her mind to it, but I'd yet to see her square off against anyone in close combat. Following her plan meant I'd have to leave her alone to deal with the muscle. With only the driver guarding the chest and the open carriage door beckoning, I considered following the letter of her instruction. But I'm nothing if not a gentleman. So the thought of leaving a woman, even one as capable as Matilda, alone to fight two assailants left a sour feeling in my stomach. Besides, I'd seen the dwarf in action with his gauntlets. One punch and he'd have Matilda broken and bloody on the ground. He might even kill her. As long as I remained cursed, that would not do. The pair approached Matilda cautiously. Glances all about told me they expected more than just a single woman to have waylaid them. While they remained otherwise occupied, I swooped in from the shadows to take out the driver. The man wasn't armed, so I went at him with fists alone. No need for killing yet, especially when a right hook and a four-fingered jab to the pressure point at his neck momentarily interrupted his breathing. He reeled back, hit his head on the carriage, and went down. My sudden attack hadn't gone unnoticed by Matilda's adversaries. Muscles turned round and charged while Raid lunged at the witch. Drawing my long knives, I'd barely taken 3 steps when I found myself deflecting a barrage of attacks. The man was as fast as he was big and skilled enough that I had little chance to counter. A few more seconds of that and I realized I wasn't facing a simple barroom bruiser. This man was Blackguard, which made sense now that I thought about it. Whatever was inside that chest was important enough that Gwendolyn Goddard had overseen its loading. It made sense that she'd have a guardsman come along to make sure it reached its destination. While I contemplated the importance Gwendolyn assigned to the chest's safe transport, the guardsman countered the thrust of one of my knives and blocked a cut from the other, but came up short as I reversed my grip, slashed at his leg in a feint, then hit him square in the face with my fist. Staggering back, he had the wherewithal to look past the blood spurting from his nose to dodge a low stab, but not enough to avoid the side kick that knocked him from his feet. While he wheezed for breath, I looked past him to see how Matilda fared against the gauntleted dwarf, who right then had one arm drawn back. The fingers of his gauntlet curled into a massive fist that blazed with azure energy. His hand shot out like a battering ram, the motion a blur of crackling, spitting force met in kind by a burning glow of amber that shone from the witch's upraised hand. Raid's blow slammed into her open palm. I expected Matilda's hand, arm, her entire body, to crumble under the impact. She took it, though, not reacting except to grimace as her magic absorbed the gauntlet's power. Raid showed no signs of letting up. He hit her with a right, which she absorbed, then a left, and another right. Each time, her amber energy flared, negating the force of the attack, though Matilda fell back with each blow. First, a single step, then 2, while her arm, which she'd held straight until now, wavered. The dwarf was wearing her down, one punch at a time. Meanwhile, my opponent started to rise in hopes of continuing our fight. A kick to the face sent him into a groaning state of semi-unconsciousness. I lifted his club, getting a feel for the weight of it as I approached Raid from behind. Matilda took another of his blows and was readying herself for the next when I slammed the club down on the dwarf's head. Dwarves have hard heads, or so they say, so I made sure I hit him with everything I had. He turned around enough to get a look at me in my mask and stumble for a step or two before he joined the guardsman on the ground. Matilda let out a breath. Nodding at me, she closed her fist, snuffing out her spell's amber energy. She looked paler than usual and a little wobbly on her feet. Shaking her head, she inhaled deeply, then took a step forward. She managed the first one all right, but swooned so badly with the second that she was halfway to the ground when I rushed in to catch her. With one arm wrapped around her waist, I carried her back to the carriage. She remained conscious but weak. Using the carriage for support, she kept her feet, and, after a few moments, even looked a little less flushed. "It is only the after-effects of my magic," she said, her voice quiet and her eyes gone rheumy. "It will pass." She waved a hand at me. "Get the chest. We should go before its protectors awaken." She was right. I jumped into the carriage, and there it was, resting in plain view. Sharp, rectangular corners and flat metal sides with little ornamentation described it best. It wasn't even locked. I put a hand to either side and lifted it, or tried to. I nearly pulled something on my first attempt. I spread my feet and bent my knees, then tried again. That time I managed it, not so much walking out of the carriage as falling from it as I stumbled under the chest's weight. Shoulders slumped, Matilda pushed away from the brougham and at least stood on her own. She started heading for our earlier place of subterfuge, beckoning me to follow. Together we stumbled into the side alley, not stopping until we'd thoroughly ensconced ourselves in the city's maze of backways. Once we had, I thankfully lowered the chest to the ground. While I stretched my arms, hands, and fingers, Matilda kneeled before the box to study it. "I don't think we should open it here," I said. "Let's wait until we're somewhere." Matilda lifted the latch and swung the lid open. I sighed because I recognized what was inside. "Do you know what this is?" Matilda asked. I pulled my mask down. "Specifically, no, but I've seen something like it before." Only that time, the spinning ball of black energy had been much larger, large enough that myself and one other had fallen into it, gone to some other place for what had seemed an eternity, but in reality had spanned only a few seconds before we'd popped back out the other side. The chest held an almost exact replica of that ball of crackling energy, only smaller. It even had tiny lightning-like flickers shooting out from it in an irregular pattern. One significant difference was that this miniature version was held inside a thick glass and metal sphere, crisscrossed with alchemical tubules pulsing with orange-colored energy. On impulse, I moved my hand over the containment sphere's surface. The dark flickers of energy within followed my movement, their concentration growing denser where my fingers hovered over the ball of energy. I stood, needing to put some distance between myself and it. Matilda closed the chest. Then, her gaze never leaving it, she said, "I told you before of my vision of how the warders mean to summon the power of the dragon. If they succeed, what else but great destruction can befall our city? I sense many things when I look at what is inside this box, but most of all, I sense a beginning." A beginning to what? We all wanted to know the answer to that fundamental question. What were the warders up to? I wondered with some small measure of hope if Matilda's spirits knew. Matilda shook her head in a slight, barely perceptible gesture. They did not. "The last time I saw something like this was inside a Jackery temple," I said. "That sphere had been much larger, though it looked a lot like this one. Right now, the question is, what are the warders doing with this smaller version of it?" Another perfunctory shake of the head. "I do not have any answers, but I know we must hide or destroy this thing, so neither warder nor Jackery can ever make use of it." Or the Progressive Society. I'd no idea how deep their interest in the spinning black ball of energy went, but knowing Gwendolyn, I'm sure she hoped to gain some advantage. "What do you propose?" I asked. "How do we destroy it?" Matilda turned toward me. "Not we. I will do this alone. If I cannot destroy it, I will hide it where no one will ever find it, a place only I will know about." "You afraid I'll tell someone?" "Yes. Perhaps willingly, or perhaps under duress. Either way, you cannot reveal what you do not know. The warders, Jackery, even the members of this progressive society know you. They do not, however, know me. They don't know you yet, but if you take the chest, they'll learn of you soon enough. They wouldn't dare enter the shambles to look for me. Regardless, it is a risk I am willing to take." I considered arguing with her some more, but to what end? I didn't know what to do with the chest other than to bring it to Atticus, who'd want to submit it to his scientists for further study. Unlock its mysteries and all that. Liz, about the same, with little to no consideration for the danger the thing posed. I'd agreed to pass on any information I'd learned, but I had said nothing about delivering potentially deadly artifacts. Sometimes a thing deserves no more consideration than its immediate destruction, a truth neither had grasped yet. Matilda had the right idea. Destroy it or hide it away. No other action was acceptable where spinning black spheres of energy were concerned. "Will you need help with it?" I asked. "It's rather heavy." She shook her head. "I'll manage." Does this mean we're finished? Or, more importantly, did this free me of the curse? "Yes, we are done. I will lift the curse." She neither said anything, nor made any strange movements with her hands. She simply paused, then said, "It is done." I felt no different, but then I'd felt nothing before when she'd cursed me. There was only one way to know for sure. Matilda wrapped her arms around the chest and stood without dropping it. Her entire body quivered from the strain, but she proved capable of managing its weight as she took a few steps with it. "Thank you for your help," Matilda said without turning back to me. "I will send the rest of your payment to the Wilshire Bank and Trust." Saying nothing as she shuffled away into the darkness, I had half a mind to seek the nearest wine shop to make sure the curse was really lifted. But it had been a long night, and I was too damn tired. So I found the easiest way to the rooftops and returned to the shambles and my hole-in-the-wall room. It was small, dingy, and smelled funny, but it was safe from warders, jackery, and guardsmen. Once there, I slept the sleep of the dead, waking the next day long after the sun had risen. I went through my morning stretching routine, left out most of the exercising this time since I'd gotten enough of that last night, then dressed and headed out to Lady Smithers' bathhouse, where I paid for a private room, a hot bath, and no interruptions. After an hour of soaking, I dressed and wound my way down the shambles' main avenues for a spell before leaving the borough for greener pastures and finer watering holes. With the black guardsmen still hunting me, I'd had to vary my choice of wine shops often. Next on the list was Pannernine's, where I soon settled into a corner table. It was past noon, and I was famished, so I ordered my meal first, selecting the roasted duck and greens of the day and letting the serving girl know to bring out my usual glass of wine with my food. Given the time of day, Pannernine's was mostly empty. A drunk slumped over by the door slept off last night's, or this morning's, drinking. A couple had come in for lunch, and a trio of older gentlemen sat at a table drinking and playing cards. With the room so quiet, I found it easy to continue the thinking I'd started earlier in the tub. My thoughts remained centered on the chest and the black ball of energy inside. Thankfully, my order arrived quickly, freeing me to concentrate on something else. Of course, the first thing I sampled was the wine, which I could tell from a casual sniff had gone bad. The musty, corked taste confirmed its quality, yet nothing sweeter had ever touched my lips. Thank the old gods, the curse was lifted. At that very moment, amidst my inner celebration, Raid Lendon walked into the common room. He spotted me at once, so with no chance to duck out of sight or try to leave, I had little choice but to wait for him to arrive at my table. The best I could say about the dwarf as I watched his approach was that he looked like a wreck. He wore the same clothes as last night. Bags hung heavy under sleepy eyes, and his beard had half come loose from its braid. He held a leather valise in one hand, and his magically or technologically enhanced gauntlets hung from his belt. He didn't ask to sit, but did so anyway, placing the case on the floor next to his chair. "You're a hard man to find, Thornton," the dwarf said, his voice a weary rumble of a half-hearted landslide. "Good afternoon, Mr. Lendon," I said, tipping my glass for another taste while I moved my other hand to the hilt of one of my long knives. He looked around the room quizzically, especially at the windows and the brimming light outside. "Afternoon? I suppose it is, isn't it?" He turned toward me and said, "So, you remember me?" "Of course. I didn't recognize you at Ridland's. Nice bit of boxing, by the way. But I had no trouble identifying you alongside Ms. Goddard inside that warehouse. How's your sister?" "Kess is fine," Raid said. "She's smart enough to stick to our usual business for the society and not get involved in Ms. Goddard's seedy ventures, as she calls them. Speaking of Ms. Goddard, I'll have to tell her she was right about who waylaid us. I only got a brief look at you, but I saw enough details for Ms. Goddard to make an educated guess." "And your head?" I asked. "I didn't hit you too hard, did I?" Raid snorted, but his hand went to his head, where I'd connected with the club. "My mother used to hit me harder than that when I stole too many cookies from the jar, but it was a good shot, I'll admit." Gesturing with his chin at my glass, he asked, "What's that you're drinking?" "A less than satisfactory Vrannon Mountain vintage," I said, lifting my glass to wave its brim under my nose. I tried not to make a face at the corky smell. Like a man deprived of water for too long, neither the spoiled smell nor its effect on the taste kept me from taking another swallow. But you'll find nothing finer in an establishment such as this. Raid waved the serving girl over. "A glass of the same. The food, too." Yes, the food, which I'd entirely forgotten about while I otherwise indulged myself. I lifted a fork but hesitated. You don't mind, do you? I had an especially long night. I'm quite famished. Raid didn't mind at all. Since it did not appear the dwarf had come looking for a fight, I relaxed the grip on my weapon and dug in. I found the duck dark and succulent, and the greens a tad soggy but palatable enough. Raid's glass arrived in short order, his wine poured, and his plate served. We both set in, too busy to talk. I finished first. Wiping my mouth with a napkin, I peered over the side of the table to look at the leather travel case Mr. Lendon had brought with him. Getting out of the city? I asked, finishing the last of my wine. I raised my glass to indicate I was ready for another. After you lost Ms. Goddard's black ball of energy, I can't say I blame you. Finishing his last bite, Raid pushed his chair back to make himself more comfortable. You looked at what's inside. Good. It makes this easier. Easier how? Our server cleared our plates and poured more wine for each of us, because you know what's at stake, and what will happen if you don't help me recover the Stilson's orb, or as you call it, the black ball of energy. I pushed my chair back, seemingly to also make myself comfortable, but really to ensure I had easy access to my weapons in case the mood went sour. No offense, Mr. Lendon, but... Call me Raid. Raid it is. No offense, but I just helped steal the orb from you. Why would I help you recover it? More to the point, why are you even here asking? I doubt Ms. Goddard gave her approval for this visit of yours. The dwarf chuckled. There's no earning that woman's approval. She's a cold-hearted vixen if I ever saw one. I told Ms. Goddard I'd handle this my way, and here I am, handling it. I'm not sure I agree, Raid. I appreciate you coming to talk this over, but unless you're prepared to put on your gauntlets, I don't think there's much more for us to discuss. I won't help you recover the orb. Whatever plan Ms. Goddard had for it is done. She won't be getting it back. You're right about that. She's not getting it back, and neither is anyone else. I shook my head in confusion. I think that blow to your head did more damage than you think. If no one's getting it, then why go after it? Because the containment sphere keeping the power of the Stilson's orb in check won't last much longer. Come again? I asked. The orb was inside a glass and metal sphere. Yes, I remember that. It's called a dilutive containment sphere. It siphons off excess energy from whatever is stored inside of it. With lower energy sources, it works fine. But the Stilson's orb isn't low energy. Just the opposite. The dilutive sphere was meant as a short-term solution until I transported the orb to a more powerful containment vessel. I was on my way to do that when you and your sorceress friend ambushed me. Which? The dwarf gave me a curious look. What? The woman is a witch, not a sorceress, and she is most definitely not my friend. Raid shrugged. Do I look like I give a shat? You and that whatever she is have placed the entire city in danger. If I don't contain the orb soon, very bad things will happen. It's too late now to do anything other than negate it completely. That's where the device inside my case comes into play. He patted the top of the case but said nothing else about it. How do you know the orb isn't already contained? I asked. My friend, acquaintance, told me she had the task well in hand. Raid snorted. I doubt that. I'll admit she held her own against my pile drivers, but trust me, she's got no chance against the orb. It's too powerful. I saved my questions about the gauntlets and the dwarf's fanciful name for them for another time. Powerful how? Raid ran his fingers through his beard. No offense, Mr. Thornton, but I doubt you'd understand. A Stilson's orb is an intricate bit of science. Tell me anyway. Use small words if you think that will help. But I'd like to understand the justification for your urgency. For all I know, your true intention is to use me to find the orb so you can return it to the society. Raid looked none too pleased with my persistence, but he did as I asked. A Stilson's orb started as a theoretical phenomenon. A few hundred years ago, Coruscant Stilson thought the concept up. He died without ever having seen one created. Maybe that was for the best. In any case, others continued his work. Early, partial successes were documented, but even those efforts failed to yield a stable Stilson's orb. The correct energy persistence and concentration levels were achieved, but they were missing a key ingredient in the process. Let me guess, I said. The warders figured out what was missing. Know about them, eh? Raid asked. Our paths have crossed a time or two. Raid chuckled. Of that I've no doubt. I bet they came away poorer for the encounter, too. The warders didn't figure it out, but about 50 years ago someone else did. But the warders refined the technique. I never saw how they created the orb, but I studied it before attempting to transport it. As far as Stilson's orbs go, that one is flawless. That's nice, but what's the point? What do they plan to do with it? Good question, I've no idea. But if I had to guess, I'd say they want to use it to power something. You see, the orb starts as an infinitesimal speck of energy, but even a speck of that type of energy reacts with its environment, splitting all matter in its immediate vicinity. This process releases more and more energy, which the orb absorbs, making itself denser, larger, and more powerful. What you saw represented about 6 hours of reactive time. The containment vessel can only siphon off so much energy before it loses equilibrium. Once that happens, which by now it has, the orb will continue splitting the matter around it and growing proportionally. As you can imagine, the splitting process, something we call dichotomization, is not good for anyone or anything so affected. I drummed my fingers on the table, lost in thought and trying to decide how much I wanted to reveal about my earlier encounters with other black energy spheres. Raid might already know about the Jackery's work in this very same area, or he might not. I decided now was not the best time to show my cards, so I stayed quiet as he continued. If your partner hid the chest underneath her bed, she's likely already dead. Getting caught up in the dichotomization process is not a pleasant way to go, but many more people will experience it if we don't find and contain the orb soon. If I wasn't damn tired of running about on an empty stomach and didn't need your help, I wouldn't have stopped here at all. His explanation sounded plausible enough. At least he didn't try hiding the dichotomization part, which he probably thought I knew nothing about. I leaned toward agreeing to help him if only to ensure Matilda was safe. I'd no reason to care about her or her well-being, except that, though I hated to admit it, she reminded me too much of my sister. Not in mannerisms, and certainly not in appearance, but because she was alone, fending for herself and quite certainly facing overwhelming odds. She'd gotten herself involved with the warders and had her sights on the Jackery. For better or worse, that made her an ally. I also hadn't forgotten what she'd done for me by keeping the priests off my back. Maybe I felt I owed her, or maybe I was getting soft. Either way, the decision to help Raid seemed an easy one. I lifted my wine glass and finished what remained. In the interest of full disclosure, you should know I have no idea how to find Matilda. She came to me last night wanting to hire me for this one job. Before that, I'd never seen or met her before. We parted company with no expectations of seeing one another again. We certainly didn't exchange addresses. Raid nodded, but he wasn't put off. But if you had to guess, where would you look first? She told me she lived in the shambles. Raid grunted. You know as well as I that I'll get nowhere if I go in there alone. But I'm guessing you know your way around. Am I wrong? I'd never call the shambles a home away from home, but I had spent enough time there to know how to navigate the streets and the politics of those who ruled them. The shambles was a lawless oasis where neither city guard nor private mercenary dared trod. It was an excellent place to lose oneself, but also a good place to get killed. Raid had two things in his favor, though. First, the shambles was at its safest when the sun was at its highest. Second, he had me to lead him. Not everyone knew me, but enough did that I was rarely a target for bullying, thievery, or any other sordid shambler shenanigans. All right, I said, I'll help you find the orb, but on one condition. When we're done, you tell me what Ms. Goddard is doing with the warders. Raid stood and held out a hand. You've got a deal, Mr. Thornton. I pushed my chair back and took his hand in mine. You know that's not my real name, right? The dwarf shrugged. It'll do for now. Raid lifted his valise from the floor and headed for the door without explaining what was inside. I settled up for the both of us, then followed him out. Inside the borders of the shambles, I sought a handful of my usual contacts. None of them had any idea where to find Matilda. only one person, fella everyone called Crumples, even knew who I was talking about. He told us he saw glimpses of her from time to time in the middle of the night, her presence always preceded by a mist she walked through like a ghost. That sounded like Matilda. Anyone who went to that sort of trouble to remain hidden probably wouldn't welcome me and Raid with open arms. She might even decide to curse us both. I kept that last bit to myself while we wasted the afternoon following one lead after another, which I squeezed from shamblers I rarely patronized. With the sun setting, my purse was lighter by a score of dinars, with nothing to show for my loss. Raid looked none too pleased at the prospect of giving up the hunt, but I didn't think we should continue in the dark, given our lack of progress. I thought we'd give it another hour, something I related to Raid when our problem was solved by a sudden flurry of black wings. "Matilda," said Yu as he settled onto a street lamp directly overhead. Raid glanced up, his face a mixture of curiosity and annoyance, while I stepped away in case Yu felt the need to relieve himself. "That's an odd sound for a bird," the dwarf said. "It almost sounded like Matilda." "That's exactly what it sounded like," I said. I briefly explained the crow's connection to the witch, and that his arrival meant we were in luck because Matilda was likely looking for us. "Is that right, Crow?" I asked, ignoring Raid, who looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. "Have you come to harry us with your foul temperament, or are you here to bring us to your mistress?" You squawked, and then the crow took off, following the direction of the road at a leisurely pace. "I think we're supposed to follow him." Raid wasn't convinced. If nothing else, it's better than wandering about with no specific destination in mind. He shrugged and gestured for me to lead on. Hurrying, we caught up to the crow, who circled lazily above, waiting before flying off in a straight shot toward wherever he meant to lead us. Where he easily sailed over tenements and other buildings, we had to run around them to keep the inconsiderate bird in sight, which became more difficult as the sun sank further beyond the horizon. People on the street ignored us entirely or cast curious glances our way, but none questioned our hasty passing. Once, a horse-drawn carriage rumbling past impeded our progress enough that we lost sight of the crow entirely. You had the decency to circle back, allowing us to pick up our pursuit where we'd left off. "Where the hell is this crow taking us?" Raid asked. Though the dwarf's chest heaved, each breath visible now from the growing chill in the air, he seemed to have no short supply of stamina. The same could not be said for his patience. Even mine was wearing thin. If the crow led us on a fool's errand, I might follow through on past threats. When Yu's flight plan placed him into a tight circle ahead, I knew we'd finally reached our destination. Neither of us was pleased to see he'd brought us to a cemetery, specifically Acon Cemetery, which I'd not had the occasion to visit in some time. That time, I'd been on a job for one Father Kem, who'd hired me to hunt down a wayward clergy member who wanted to bring himself back from the dead. That sort of thing never ended well for the living, so Kem had asked me to kill this wayward priest once and for all. I hadn't thought of Father Kem much since then, though it occurred to me his priestly wisdom might come in handy given the Jackery's dark ambitions. I made a mental note to visit him soon, then got my thoughts back to the present circumstances. We found the gated entry to the cemetery closed but not locked. Who would ever want to break into a graveyard? You waited for us, having found a perch on a gravestone where he occupied himself by preening his feathers. Not knowing where to go next, we waited for the crow to guide us. He'd become so absorbed with his task that I finally had to shoo him back into flight. He squawked at my interruption but beat his wings and took off, leading us deeper into the graveyard. Soon we needed the bird's direction no longer. We spotted Matilda standing at the top of a small knoll amidst a halo of moonlight. Her crow sailed in silently, coming to land on her shoulder. The witch had her back to us, but, at our approach, her head turned ever so slightly to acknowledge our presence. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Raid. Thoroughly entranced by something beyond Matilda, the dwarf stepped past her without even an acknowledgement. I stopped next to the witch. She had the fingers of one hand lifted to her mouth, biting her dark fingernails, and she flashed me a nervous glance. Peering down the knoll's slope, I looked past headstones arranged haphazardly and a sparse number of gargoyle-encrusted mausoleums to a crypt that stood out amongst its peers because streaks of black lightning arced from it. I glanced at Matilda. Let me guess. You couldn't destroy the orb, so you hid it inside that mausoleum. I tried to destroy it. My magic didn't work, so I hid it where no one would ever look. I thought I'd have time to work out how to get rid of it for good, but I had another premonition earlier this evening. The dark spirits told me to return to this place. This is what I found when I arrived. So why send for me? What do you think I can do about this? Her expression upon seeing the dwarf had told me she'd not known about my alliance with Raid, who was quite possibly the only one capable of shutting the orb down, so her summoning made little sense. It was not my choice to dispatch my familiar to bring you here. Whose was it then? Did you decide it on his own? No, you doesn't like you. He would never fetch you of his own volition. Then who told you to send him? Matilda lifted a finger to point at the mausoleum. It did. I shook my head, not understanding what she meant. Raid looked similarly perplexed. Did you lock someone up with the orb? I asked. Matilda rolled her eyes. I am referring to the orb. I nodded, as if what she'd said made perfect sense. So, the orb is speaking to you. Not the orb, she said. Some entity. The orb is the medium this entity is using to communicate. All right. This made less sense the more explanation she gave. Did this entity give you a reason it wanted me to come? She shook her head. None, it has told me. You were not its first choice. It first asked me to summon Onias. I refused. I let out an audible breath. The high priest of the Jackery. Matilda nodded. Raid, I said. What's happening here? It's like I said. The orb's fragmentation effect has gotten out of control. It's disrupting everything around it. I'm surprised the mausoleum's still in one piece. What about the voice, the one speaking to Matilda? I've no idea, he said. Maybe she's gone stark raving mad. Matilda clenched her hands into fists at her side. I am not. It doesn't matter, I said. I believe you, Matilda. I've seen some pretty unbelievable things over the past few months. You talking to an entity through a black orb is just the latest. Raid, what was your plan for turning this thing off? Right, he said, nodding. Sinking to one knee, Raid placed his traveling case on the ground. Inside was a bronze, crescent moon-shaped device, thicker in the middle and pointed at each end. He lifted it from the case by taking hold of a handle built into the middle section and holding the device before him, so that Matilda and I could better look at it. It's an alchemical recotomizer, Raid said. Designed it myself. Most of the device was bronze, but it had slitted openings along each curved end that revealed glass fuel containers. One container held a green liquid, the other blue. At the top of the device, right at the thickest part, were 3 dials, all lined up in a row. Raid turned the leftmost dial, then made minor adjustments to the other 2. The crescent's tips, which ended in thin, spiraling fingers of copper or brass, sparked with alchemical energy. It'll make quick work of the orb's fragmentation. He paused, then added, or at least I hope it does. It's never been tested. What happens if the orb's energy hits your recombobulator? I asked. Nothing. It's shielded. And what happens if the energy hits one of us? He eyed the storm encompassing the mausoleum. The exterior energy isn't as deadly as the core, but I doubt anything good. I hadn't quite expected the orb's effect to have grown so pronounced. It speaks again, Matilda said. I exchanged a glance with Raid. Neither of us had heard a thing. It says to approach. She looked at me. Only you. Not likely. Raid, what do you need to do to use that thing of yours? Just need to get close and activate it. The recotomizer will take it from there. Then let's go, I said, taking all of one step before Matilda's voice caused me to stop. It says it knows our intention, and to stay back, she said. Tell it to make up its mind, I said. Stay back or you will all suffer, it says. Tell it not to make threats it can't back up. We started toward the mausoleum, sidestepping headstones as we walked down the slope. We made it about 10 paces with no response, verbal or otherwise, from the entity. Meanwhile, dark lightning continued to dance all around the tomb. The structure's closed iron door was so dense with energy that I almost couldn't see it. As we neared the crypt, a feeling that had started in the pit of my stomach grew worse, until I felt compelled to say to the others, "Get ready." I didn't draw my long knives. For the first time in a long time, I doubted their efficacy. "Get ready for what?" Matilda asked. Raid didn't know what I meant either. No time to explain now. If either of them had been there, there'd be no need. But they hadn't experienced the utter, complete darkness, nor felt the piercing cold striking like 1,000 knife points into every part of their body all at once. Nor had either of them seen in the shifting darkness, at that very last second right before Onias and I had come back to this world, the crimson, slitted eyes watching us as we made our brief passage through that other realm. In the days following that experience, I'd wanted to believe I hadn't seen them or, laughably now, that I'd somehow imagined them. But even I, who knew evil with the intimacy of the Grim Reaper himself, couldn't have mistaken or imagined such malice. Evil like that doesn't come along often, but when it does, it isn't leaving without a fight. Matilda and Raid wanted to know what I'd meant when I said to get ready, but the truth was I had no idea. Not exactly. I just sensed that whatever we were up against had its back to the wall. It had no choice but to respond with something visceral, something extreme, something we'd no hope of fighting. "You hear something?" Raid asked. The crackle of energy made it difficult to hear anything. But I thought I'd heard something too. A repetitive noise, like a hammer banging on iron. "The noise is coming from the mausoleum," Matilda said, pointing down the slope at the structure. Sure enough, someone or something was in there, pounding on the inside of the door. We stopped, waiting, as the hammering continued, then intensified until each blow set the energy-laced door vibrating. Then, all at once, the door came loose from its hinges and fell outward. Here was something visceral and extreme. The very dead shambled forth. First one, then another, and a final one, so there were 3 in all. Each was a different size, but similarly clothed in the linen wrappings of mummification. The one in the forefront held an iron hammer in its bandaged, leathery grip. Another had a dagger with an elaborately carved handle, making it look more ceremonial than functional. The third wielded no weapon at all. Their movement was slow, but their sense of direction keen as they shuffled straight for us. "Bloody hell and good night," Raid said, taking an involuntary step back. "Look on the bright side," I said, fighting to keep the dread even I felt out of my voice. "There are only 3 of them." "No," Matilda said, "there are more." We both followed her gaze, which swept across the hundreds of headstones all around us. "There are many, many more." Thump, thump, thump. Some of the sounds came from other mausoleums, the rest from underground, as the buried dead attempted to win free of their coffins. "Move," I said, "before we're completely cut off from the crypt." We did our best to close with the 3 who stood between us and the mausoleum before the odds shifted any further against us, but 20 paces still separated us when the ground exploded in 100 places all around. Bony hands and arms burst forth, followed by skulls, torsos, and legs, until human shapes stood in every direction we looked. "The recombobulator," I said to Raid. "Give it to me." "What? Why?" "Because you can't enter the mausoleum. The dark energy will likely kill you." "And what makes you think it won't do the same to you?" "I just know. Now give it to me. Then use your gauntlets to clear me a path to the crypt." Raid did as I asked, quickly showing me how to activate the device. As soon as he had, he removed his pile-driver gauntlets from his belt and fitted them onto his hands. Crashing his knuckles together, lit each gauntlet up with azure energy. Matilda responded in kind, her hands flaring to life with her magic. Raid took the lead. As the first undead rattled toward us, I was glad he did. His punch, which hit the skeleton right in the breastbone, didn't just shatter its torso. It blasted the whole damn thing to pieces. More came at us from every direction until skeletons and other half-rotted creatures, clotted with dirt and leathery flesh, formed ranks around us. Matilda lashed out at them with her magic. Whenever she pointed a finger at a skeleton, amber energy shot out, engulfing and disintegrating it. I had to rely on more conventional methods, sidekicking one and slamming my fist into another. I wasn't entirely without my own advantages, though. Activating my force glove, I held it back, waiting. The three who'd broken free from the tomb reached us. Raid took out the one holding the dagger, his blow shattering its linen-wrapped bones, while I stepped forward to deal with the other two. Sidestepping the grasp of the first one, I slid beneath the hammer swing of the other. Its weapon was my objective, so I grabbed it by the head, then touched the open palm of my force glove to the dead thing's chest. The glove's effect was instantaneous and final, sending the undead creature flying through the air to slam into the outside wall of the tomb where it had lain buried for countless generations before tonight. I was left with the hammer in the thing's hand, which had broken off from its arm. Its fingers continued to move like the legs of a spider trying to crawl up the hammer's shaft to get at me. I slammed the haft into the ground, using my boot to scrape the appendage off when that wasn't enough. Crunching the hand with my other foot, I spun around, my new weapon smashing into the skulls of those who'd gotten close. "Quickly now," Matilda said. "We're almost there." We fell to the task, Raid smashing with alternating punches, me using my hammer to crack the bones reaching in from every direction, and Matilda lashing out with amber energy, again and again, to turn undead into piles of ash. Fighting for every foot, we punched, smashed, and burned anything that wasn't alive, until the mausoleum was a stone's throw away, and the flickers of dark energy were close enough to reach out and touch. Matilda and Raid stopped. They could go no further into that maelstrom of chaotic dark energy, but I could, or so I thought. I had a theory, and only one way to prove it. I tossed the iron hammer aside and stepped into the storm without a word to the others. Tendrils of energy embraced me, dancing along my body in crackling rivulets that shifted and shimmered, but did not harm or otherwise affect me. Saving my relief for later, I strode through the maelstrom, walking over the collapsed door to enter the structure. The orb was there, many times larger than before, and looking very much like the one the Jackery had created inside their temple using their horizon dichotomizer. I didn't know if this orb possessed identical characteristics to that one beyond its appearance, nor did I care. I wasn't here to perform a scientific analysis. I was here to shut the damn thing down. I pointed the recotomizer at the sphere. "If you're asking me not to pull the trigger right now, I can't hear you. I hope you can hear me, though. I don't know what you are or what your plan is. But if you thought I'd help you, you made a serious error in judgment. Too bad for you that Onias isn't here. I know he wants to help you. Is that what he's doing? Opening portals to other worlds? Trying to bring you here?" No answer. None I heard, at least. Never mind. I'll figure it out on my own, or maybe I'll bring this whole thing to an end by killing Onias. Matilda had it right. Cut off the snake's head if you want to kill it. But she was going after the wrong snake. I won't make the same mistake. Pulling the trigger, I felt a vibration, but nothing shot out from the recotomizer. I don't know what I expected. A glorious burst of white energy to sweep away the dark? That didn't happen. But the tips of the crescent-shaped device started to glow with increasing effulgence until they shone with such brilliance I had to look away. The dark energy reacted. The lightning-like streaks lessened, replaced by explosive sparks in every direction. I held my ground and my arms steady, even as the mausoleum walls shook with such force that cracks formed like spiderwebs across their surface. The entire structure buckled, but it didn't cave. Not yet. I did my best to look past the glowing tips of the recotomizer. The orb remained but had grown smaller and shrank further by the second. Above my head, the ceiling shifted, and the entire structure groaned. This was taking too long. I walked right up to the orb, taking one deep breath before jamming the tips of the device into the darkness. That contact brought back all the memories of my brief passage to that other place. No, not memories, but the actual sensations. Piercing cold and darkness so absolute it was as if I'd stepped into a void. Also, like before, the entity was there, no longer hidden, but acutely tangible to my senses now. You cannot stop what is coming. The entity's voice slammed into me, hurling me back with such force I lost my grip on the recotomizer. I hit something hard, a wall, I think, then fell to the ground. Everything went silent. The orb and its chaos of dark energy were gone. Through the dust, I saw 4 empty sarcophagi, one for each of the 3 risen dead, and one more that must have housed the orb and the chest that had failed to contain it. Little of that sarcophagus remained beyond the stone pedestal, and even that had a spherical scoop carved from it where the orb had disrupted its matter. The mausoleum remained standing, though given the size of the cracks I saw on the walls and ceiling, I didn't think it was a good idea to push my luck any further by remaining inside. Standing, I was relieved to find nothing broken. I quickly but carefully left the vault's confines behind to enter the crisp, clear night. Raid and Matilda stood there waiting for me. Raid was powering down his gauntlets, and Matilda's hands no longer glowed. Both breathed heavily. "We won," I said with little triumph. "This time," Matilda said, "but the entity is not done. It will seek to return. What did you say to it to make it so angry?" I didn't understand at first, but then I realized she'd heard every word, every response it made that I couldn't hear while I spoke to it. I told it to go back to hell and stay there. I'm sure it had said something similar to me, but I wasn't interested in hearing about it right now. I looked around. Shattered bones and piles of ash littered the cemetery. The ground had been turned in 100, perhaps 1,000 places. The risen dead, those not blasted to pieces, lay in all directions. At least the orb's negation had returned them to death. "Quite a mess," I said. "One which will need some explaining," Raid said. "The authorities will be here any moment, I suspect. Something like this doesn't go unnoticed, even if we are in a graveyard in the middle of the night." "All the more reason for us to leave," I said. "You two go," Raid said. "I'll stay." He held up his hand to head off any protests. "Look, someone needs to. If I don't explain it to them now, how long will it take before they come around the society asking questions? I'll give them some technical explanation they won't understand, make something up about an experiment gone wrong, but let them know everything is under control now." Raid chuckled. "I've certainly had to explain worse. If black spheres of energy and the dead rising aren't the worst, then I think you and I should sit down over a glass of wine again sometime soon." "Don't worry, Thomas. I have a feeling you and I will see each other again. I found you once. I can do so again." "Yes, about that. I wasn't an easy man to find. The old gods knew Captain Belford of the Black Guard had been trying hard enough with little to show for it. How did you find me?" "Another time," Raid said. "I think someone is coming. Best you two leave before you're spotted." He was right. I heard voices and the rapid clomp of cobblestompers in the distance. "One last thing before we go," I said to Raid. "You should know this wasn't my first time seeing a Stilson's orb. A Jackery machine had created the other one. The warders paid an associate of mine to destroy it. It seems counterintuitive that they'd turn around and build their own. But is it possible they did?" "More than possible," Raid said, though I saw no such thing to confirm it. If Ms. Goddard was told anything, that information was not shared with me. My job was to analyze the orb and not ask questions beyond that. Could they have found such a machine? "Found it?" Raid said, looking at me like I was crazy. "Found it where?" "Word is the warders have several ongoing excavations outside the city walls. One of those, perhaps?" The dwarf didn't immediately refute my theory, nor did he look convinced of the likelihood. The footsteps in the distance were not so distant now, and with Matilda looking increasingly nervous at the guard's approach, I resigned to have my line of inquiry answered another day. Raid also owed me an explanation about Ms. Goddard's relationship with the warders, but that could also wait for another time. We said a quick farewell to Raid, then beat a hasty departure in the direction opposite the approaching guards. We crossed more of the cemetery than we liked, but got away clean. A few blocks later, we stopped. We both knew it was time to part ways, perhaps for good this time, though I had an idea about that. "I don't know where your passion for all of this comes from, Matilda," but I know some individuals who share it. If you like, I'll make an introduction. I'm sure they'd appreciate your help and, who knows, maybe even your talents. You speak of Elizabeth West and Atticus Drake. Now, how in Ool do you know who they are? Never mind. Yes, that's who I'm talking about. Atticus is pleasant enough. So is Liz, most of the time. To people other than me, anyway. I'm sure you two would get along splendidly. I smiled, to which Matilda only glowered. Yes, well, getting along isn't the point, is it? The point is, you all share a common goal. Better to pool your resources and all that. At the very least, you wouldn't have to press on alone. I am not alone. I have you. Me? I'll admit we did work pretty well together, but this was a one-time thing. I'm strictly a solo act, and while I've been known to form temporary partnerships like our own from time to time, it's the exception to the rule. I meant my familiar. I knew that. Where is your crow, anyway? I haven't seen him since we entered the cemetery. Do me a favor and tell him I hope I never see him again. Oh, you will see him again. When the dark fires of that other place consume this city, you will find his bones beside mine and those of everyone living here. That is the future I have seen, but it is only one possible future. Nothing is set in stone. That's good, because that sounds terrible for business. Is that the only reason you are here in the middle of the night, fighting to stop this ultimate destruction? It's as good as any, isn't it? Humph. You may fool others, but I know you are not so self-centered. There are people you care about in this city. You have friends. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but she paused as if sensing the mistake she was about to make. With some intuition about what she might say next, I hoped she kept her mouth shut. She dashed such hopes with two simple words. Even family. I had my knife drawn and at her throat in such a practiced, fluid motion, she had no chance of preventing it. She was one neat slice away from having her blood spilled across the ground. By the look in her eyes, which had gone wide with surprise, she knew it too. Tread carefully, Matilda. We had some fun tonight and shared some memories, but do not presume to think you know me. We all have pasts we don't want to talk about. The difference is that I've killed everyone who knew anything about mine. I'll concede I have a friend or two. But family? Whatever hoodoo you used to conjure up such thoughts was wrong. I have no family. Am I clear? She nodded slowly, all too aware of the naked steel resting against her skin. I stepped back and, putting my knife away, smiled. Good. Now, give some thought to my proposal about teaming up with my associates. If you change your mind about going it alone, I'm sure the dark spirits will tell you where to find me. I left the alley without saying another word. As soon as I was out of sight, I stopped and let out a breath. For the briefest second, I considered going back and finishing her. She knew too much. I'd let her knowledge of my relationship with Elizabeth slide because Liz knew how to take care of herself. But if Matilda knew anything beyond the general notion that I'd family inside the city walls, if she knew about Olivia, then leaving the witch alive was too great a danger. The old gods knew I'd killed over less. This time was no different. It wasn't the damage Matilda might do to Olivia on her own. The witch had no reason to harm her. But Matilda knowing about her was a liability some others might come along someday and exploit. No matter how I played it out, I saw nothing good coming from Matilda going on living. I returned to the alley, partially relieved to find her already gone. But I couldn't give up so easily, so I climbed to the rooftops, searching for her. Some part of me hoped I wouldn't find her, but I did, at the edge of the shambles. She hurried through back alleys dark enough for my purpose. Despite that, I held back, simply following for now. I don't know what stayed my hand. I didn't know her well enough to feel anything toward her, and I'd meant what I'd said about our adventures this evening. They formed no camaraderie between us. Perhaps I feared her witchcraft, though I knew when it came time to use my killing knife, I'd come at her so fast she'd have little chance of responding. Yet I continued to hang back, waiting for I didn't know what. Matilda stopped in an alley with no obvious exits. I soon learned the dead end was no dead end at all, as she partially slid open a cleverly disguised metal door that she promptly stepped through. The door slid closed behind her, and she was gone. Cursing because I thought I'd lost her, I considered dropping into the alley in pursuit when I saw a single candle flare to life through a second-story window. Matilda walked across a room, the candle held before her. I followed her progress across 2 more windows before she stopped. Leaning forward, she put the candle down and extended her arms to embrace a young girl who was, without a doubt, the spitting image of her mother. Their embrace was brief, then the pair strolled out of view. People felt the safest at home, making this the ideal time to strike. Even as the thought crossed my mind, I knew I wouldn't take any such action. Maybe I didn't need to kill Matilda. We all have secrets, I'd told her. Now I knew hers. I'd have to make her aware that I knew about her daughter and that we were even, with equal leverage over one another. She'd never give up my secret because she knew I'd give up hers. It was a balance with reprehensible underpinnings, but a balance nonetheless. I headed for my place in the shambles. Come morning, I'd have to track down Liz and relay everything that had occurred this evening. Once she had joined her mind with that of Atticus, they'd figure out what to do. I'd have to make sure they didn't dismiss Matilda as a crackpot, though. I had no idea if dark spirits really talked to her or not, but she knew about the dragon, something we'd only just learned about ourselves. Were the entity and the dragon one and the same? I had wanted to ask Matilda her thoughts before she'd interrupted things by getting personal. In hindsight, it was a good thing I hadn't killed her. She'd proven herself a powerful ally. I knew Atticus and Liz would welcome her help if Matilda allowed me to make their introduction. I looked up at the moon, gauging the time. Late, but not too late. I changed direction, heading for the mulling mule. It wasn't like me to seek the company of others, but I felt a strange desire to not be alone presently. It wasn't every night one beat back the dead and stared into the abysmal eyes of an otherworldly being. Such an evening demanded a fine, celebratory claret to put the finishing touches on it. While I walked, I started whistling an old tune, something my sister used to sing to me before bedtime, as I recall. The tune carried me through the shambles all the way to my destination. You've reached the end of this adventure. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to get a notification when each new story is available. You can view all my books and get the latest news by visiting scottmarlowe.com.